Today is Tuesday, March the 5th, a lovely day here in Sun City West. This is the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, and my name is Christine Novello. In the absence of our chair, the Treasurer Dick Rhodes, I will be facilitating and chairing today's meeting. Before we begin, please rise and join me in our in our Pledge of Allegiance, not the national. Again, good morning. My name is Christine Novello. I'm a member of the Budget and Finance Committee. I'm also a member of our Governing Board of Directors. I'll be chairing today's meeting in the absence of Dick Rhodes. I'm joined today by the rest of the Budget and Finance Committee. From your left, going across the table, that's Lynn Kellis, Gary Bosack, David Miller, Ray Davies, we have Dwayne Parsons, and of course our CFO to your right of Dwayne. Here is Cliff. At home today, we have Frank Bagnato participating remotely. So that's your Budget and Finance Committee of today. We do have a quorum, so but before we begin, we'll do just a few more quick items of housekeeping. These meetings are held in accordance with Arizona Open Meetings Law, which means that they're open to the public. However, only owner members are qualified to ask questions. So when you do ask a question, and every resident and owner will be invited to the microphone to ask questions at the end of each topic. Please give your name and your rec card number when you come to the microphone. And if you're listening at home, we ask you to do the same. Please give your name and rec card number as you make your comments online. We'll do our best to address those comments that are online. Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay between what we're saying here in the room and what you're hearing. If by chance we miss that during the topic, we will wrap up at the end and cover anything that you may have taken in at that time. Remember too, if you run out of room, if you're at home and you run out of room in the chat box, you can do more than one comment. We will read them out together. My colleague Ray here to your left, to my right, will be helping to make sure that we remember to get all of those comments addressed. And we'll also try to remember, as always, as if we could forget, our colleague Frank, who will be participating from home. But Frank, if we do forget to ask you, I ask you to please not be shy, Frank, and come on to the microphone and let us know. But we'll try to remember to go around table.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. So with that, we'll go straight into item number 2, the approval of minutes. We have we had a revision to the minutes that were drafted by our Secretary Pro Tem. Committee, if you've had a chance to review those changes, they're in the packet in front of you. Does anybody have any concerns? All right, hearing none, we'll approve those amended minutes or accept them as approved. We'll move right into item number 3, which is new business. We have a packed agenda today. It's budget season is always a lot of fun and a lot of information. So again, thanks to everyone for joining us this morning. We're going to start off with a presentation on our workers' compensation insurance. So for that, we have both our head of HR, Kirsten Peterson, as well as the Senior Vice President and Principal for our account at Lovitt and Touche, Mr. Brian Wilder. So Kirsten, if you could kick us off on item 3.01. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, community members and our Budget and Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us. I would like to present to you today the operations side of the house with regard to workers' compensation, how things are managed, what we look at, how we interact with our employees. So we're going to go through a few subjects here. We're going to talk about who our HR and safety team is. Last year, I think we had the same meeting. We have now added a safety person onto our team. We're going to talk about who the partners are with regard to safety within the rec centers of Sun City West. We're going to talk about who are our employees and where do they work. We're going to talk about how we keep our employees safe, what we've been up to in the past year, what our protocols are, and what we do as far as what happens when we do have an incident. Then you will hear from Brian Wilder of Lovitt Touche, which is part of the umbrella of the Marsh McLennan Group. There we go. So here is your HR team. I work here in HR, and I also cover safety. We have two folks in the HR assistant positions, Raquel Martinez and Luis Gazar. And in August, we added Glenn Blackshear into the position of safety coordinator. So when we look at who are our partners in the safety and work comp program, we look at several different parts of that. Our employees, we take a holistic approach, and you might hear me say that word more than once, but we're looking at top down, bottom up. So when we talk to and think about work comp and safety, we encompass every facet of all of our employees. So we task our managers, supervisors, facility leads, our frontline. So think about frontline employees being those that greet you at the community centers and take your rec cards. It could be someone checking you in at the golf facility. And then the back of the house, those folks that keep our beautiful facilities clean and pristine, that are working behind the scenes and working in the evenings and sometimes in the evenings and nights to keep us looking as good as we do. So they're all those employees are involved in a safety program. We have Lovitt and Touche, again, part of Marsh, and that's Brian Wilder, and you'll hear from him in just a moment. He helps us manage and work through the work comp claims. We have CopperPoint, who are our adjusters. And so anytime we do have an impact or a claim that comes up, we have a claim adjuster that is assigned to our specific team. We have the same person year over year so that they have a very in-depth knowledge of who we are and what we do so that they can understand the needs that we have. Oh, no. That's not. There we go. So when we think about our employees, here I want to talk to you about the breadth of our employees. We have 33 different departments that we are responsible for, and I talk about we being all of us from operations in the light of 26 locations and 51 buildings that we are responsible for providing support to. We have 93 different positions that employees work within, and we work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and that includes holidays. So if you're trying to golf on a holiday, you have support. If you want to take the grandkids swimming, we have somebody there to support you. We currently have 461 employees. Of those, 282 are part-time or seasonal. We have 179 full-time employees. One of the key and most fascinating things when I came on board is understanding that 54% of our employees are people like yourselves that are sitting here in the audience that are community members. We value that. We think it's a great thing. 54% of those, again, are residents within our community. And you're going to hear when we talk about what impacts our rates, you're going to hear that sometimes our age demographic may push our rates a little bit higher. So again, one of those things that we do have is we have 247 of our employees are over the age of 65, and the average age of those employees is 73 years. So we are a very unique employer in that respect. So how do we keep all of us safe, not only our employees, but our residents, because we're looking at safety from, again, the top to the bottom, bottom to the top. When we talk about hiring people into positions, we look at and collaborate with our subject matter experts. We want to know if there's any changes, any things that have come about that we want to update for our knowledge, skills, and abilities as far as the job descriptions. We have a safety committee that meets monthly, and we have representatives from all of the different departments and operational parts of the business. We discuss issues that are identified or things that we might not have thought about or that we want to think about. And we decide, do we need to make any changes? We task our supervisors, each one of us, to walk our facilities, look around, what do we see? Are there things that we need to change, make updates? Are there areas of concerns? We don't need to wait until a safety committee happens. If there's a need that's identified, we will jump right on it at that moment. And we also work and make sure that that all of our employees have the things that they need in order to do their jobs efficiently and safely. So what is new in safety, and what did we do in this past year? So last year I stood up here and I talked about what would we do and what did I envision for the safety department. One of those was hiring a safety coordinator, and we've done that. One of the other things we did is we instituted a very robust and vigorous transitional and return to work program. So we work with, when an employee has an incident, illness, or injury, we talk with the employee first of all, we work with the supervisor, we work with their healthcare provider, whatever that form that comes in. And if they have restrictions, we talk to them and we work within those restrictions. So sometimes there might be a time loss where that person needs to stay home, and it may be for 2 or 3 days, it might be 4 or 5. It just depends on whatever the healthcare provider gives us. When it's time for them to return to work, again, we're going to work within those restrictions as set forth by a healthcare provider because they are our subject matter experts. And we work with our supervisors and our leads to put that person back to work, making sure that we are working within those restrictions and having those conversations with our employees. So if we do have restrictions, we're making sure that we're having that conversation directly one-on-one with our supervisors so that they know what to expect and the duration of that time. So our after incident protocols, they have remained the same. Our goal is to partner with our employees. And I know that I've used the word hour, and someone on my staff said, why are you capitalizing hour? And I want to call that out a little bit. These are our employees. These are your employees. These are people that help us get the job done. And so again, we want to make sure that we're partnering with those people to get them back to work and keep them safe. So we are looking to return them to work in either a full duty capacity. Sometimes they can come back in a full duty. Otherwise, they may come back in that transitional duty process that we talked about earlier. And it may change over time. So perhaps they come back with a 10-pound lifting restriction for 2 weeks, and then the next week it's a 5-pound lifting restriction. So we're updating those things with our people and our supervisors all the time. What that does is it keeps our claims cost lower. And that's the goal of everything, is to keep people safe and to do it in a reasonably cost-effective way. So that ends my presentation. I would like to introduce you to Brian Wilder. He works at Lovitt and Touche and part of Marsh, and he will provide how we get to the claims analysis and how we come to the cost of that program. So it's I think you just went there.
All right, thank you, Kirsten. I appreciate it, and thank you to everyone in attendance for giving me the opportunity to speak. Again, my name is Brian Wilder. I'm with Marsh McLennan Agency, formerly known as Lovitt and Touche. We were acquired in 2019, and just now we're kind of switching the names. That's that. So I'm talking workers' compensation to go through. So let me just frame this a little bit. It was a challenging renewal. Okay, I'm not gonna shy away from that. It was, but things are going, I think, in the right direction. 22 was a tough year, and I'm going to hit you just with some numbers and kind of go from there. So we'll frame the current situation. We'll talk about actual losses and then what's expected. When I say expected, there's a formula that goes into workers' compensation where they look at class codes and then from there say what is a average or where should losses be with air quotes, and then how do actual losses come in, and then get into that EMOD analysis. That's just going to be the numbers of workers' comp to give you some credits and debits based on where the numbers are coming in. We're going to look at some claims analysis, not going into details, but more big picture on claims to the why. And then how do we reverse this trend? And specifically, what have we been doing for the last few years and what do we continue to do to reverse the trend? Okay, this next slide is rather busy, but I think it's worthwhile to present it to all of you. This is the quote, really the quote that we get from CopperPoint in this situation, who's the workers' compensation carrier. I'm going to get into more details on a lot of this stuff in the presentation, but it's important to just start with what we see from the carrier. At the top here, you see 9061, 9060. The way that the governing body, which is the National Council on Compensation Insurance, we refer to that as NCCI, does it, is they look at the description of the job description of the employees, and they find the codes that are the best to group everybody into, and then they assign a rate to that. It goes off of payroll, and it's for every $100 of payroll times the rate. That's how we get to the premium dollars on the right. So here you get the rates, this expiring rate, and then this year's rate. And then from there you get what's called the manual premium, and then as we walk down the line all the way to the total. Everything here, okay, cannot be touched by the insurance company. Okay, that's all set by the NCCI group and then the standard of the workers' compensation. And the number that probably really jumps off the page is this experience modification number of 1.64. That's an additional 106,157 that's added to the renewal based on that number. And I'll get to this later. The other numbers right here, the 0.89 and the 0.99 from the expiring to the renewal rate, those are set by NCCI, the National Council of Compensation Insurance I touched on earlier. However, there can be credits and debits that are applied by the insurance company. And this is the only lever that the insurance company has to try and rate it where they need to rate it to have it be a profitable account to them. And this is where CopperPoint applied a 35% debit. That's going the wrong way, if you will, from a pricing standpoint, extra charge on the account. And I'll explain why a little bit later. So this is really where the rubber meets the road, for lack of a better term. The way that the experience modification is set up, and that was that number that was the 1.64 that led to approximately $106,000 of additional dollars to the renewal, is they look at a 3-year time. Okay, they consider the last year, so in this case 2023, too green because the claims haven't matured enough to actually pay out. So they look at 3 years prior to that. So in this case, it's 2020, 2021, and 2022. And based on the actuarials, they'll look at those class codes I discussed and say, what do we expect the losses to come into? And then how much should an insurance company charge to adequately cover those expected losses? And that's how they get to these numbers. And then this is really the crux of what's driving that number is the total for that 3-year period. They're expecting approximately $148,900 in losses, and we're coming in at $386,189. So it really is a math problem when you talk workers' comp. I know this is a little doom and gloom, but the rest of the end of the presentation is going to be what we're doing and what we're going to fix this and making it look better. But I just want to be straightforward with where the numbers are coming in. And it's also worth noting that this is just what falls into the calculation itself. The insurance company paid a substantial amount more money than this out. And I can touch on that later if needed, but this is just what goes into the calculation itself. This is broken out per year. Just look at that dark gray. Don't worry about the lighter shade gray. It just shows adjustment. But again, I'm a visual person. They're expecting 49. It's coming in at 150. Great year in 21. So excellent year in 21. And we are identifying what was different in 21, if anything. And I'll get to some of the takeaways from this presentation a little bit later. 22 was a really challenging year. There were a lot of claims that happened that were flukes. Okay? It was not about processes. It was not about training. It was not about education. It was about random events that happened. And unfortunately, the system is set up in a way that you as an organization get penalized for that. It's just how it works in the system. And again, I'm not going to go into the specifics for privacy reasons, but there were some things that happened that were totally out of your control and out of the team's control. But just to put in perspective, that says $220,000 in 2022. CopperPoint actually paid out $510,000 that year. Okay, that's just what goes into the formula. Okay, I touched on this. NCCI, though, they serve as the nation's most comprehensive source for workers' compensation data, insights, and solutions. And they set for 39 states is where they set the rates, and it depends on the state. So Arizona's rates will be different than another state's rates, and some have some of their own rating bureaus. An experience mod, that was that 1.64 number I was leaving to the big premium. It's known as an E-mod, X-mod. You'll hear there's a lot of different things, but it's a rating factor calculated using an individual insured or combinable group of insured's loss experience over a period of time as it correlates to the expected loss values for the industry or classification. A business experience modification directly impacts the premium, as we just showed, but 1.0 is the baseline, and they do an experience modification to try and reward those organizations that they feel are safe and then penalize ones that are not. But I will tell you that an E-mod is not a great indicator of safety because it's rear. It's 3 years ago. We're talking 20, 21, and 22. We're not talking what we're doing right now in 24, but that's what we have in the industry. And then the class codes. And one might say, well, why do we have these class codes? Can we have a different class code? And again, NCCI, the governing body, sets the framework, and then we have to fall into the framework. There's ways to dispute that, but we're comfortable that this is the proper classification. And up there, talks about country clubs and various different clubs, with one of them being outdoor and one being indoor. The outdoor is going to be a higher rate. Indoor is going to be a lower rate. Okay, this is really in the weeds. I just wanted to put up that there is a formula. I'm not going to go through there, but in general, you have what we call primary bucket and an excess bucket, and then qualifying claims go into the primary and then the excess, and then it flows through. If anyone in attendance or on the phone would like to see how the entire formula works out, I could send over that information, but it's very transparent. Workers' comp, there's hardly any gray at all. It says here's the claim activity, and then you move forward from there. I will say there is some gray that we get to later of how we tackle these and how we try and drive down these numbers to help with the cost, but I'll get to that a little bit later. But that's how it flows out, but it's a formula. It's all math-based. Okay, this slide, and again, it is a little bit busy, but this shows this is 2019, 2021, all the way up to 24. You can see what the experience modification has done. 1.08, 01, 21, 19, 13. But you can't correlate this to the loss ratio because it is rear facing. This number here in red is what we call a loss ratio. Think of that if you pay $100,000 in premium and they pay out $100,000 in claims, that's a 100% loss ratio. In general, insurance companies and workers' comp will say their break-even point is roughly 60% because they have expenses and of course profit in there. I guess break-even would be 60%. So 125, let's just say we're running hot 129, great year at 21%, and then again 22 at a roughly 400% loss ratio. So it all just kind of works together with what I've already discussed. And this is again the total incurred, just showing the claim activity. I don't think we need to get too in the weeds on this one because I already touched on some of it. Kirsten mentioned the age, and that is a challenge. I will say that you are not being penalized at all because of age of employees. It just is how the claims flow out. The data shows that as people get higher in age, it takes longer to recovery from certain injuries. And later in my presentation, you'll see that probably the biggest focus item that we have, and when I say we, I mean myself, Kirsten and her team, and also CopperPoint and their team, is on back injuries. like how do we figure out how to do proper lifting, very low weight, because that is a high amount of the claims that we can control. We're tied to strains, and a lot of them in the back. And the back's really the worst part of the body to injure from an insurance standpoint, because it's really tough to cure, and it can take a long time if you're able to cure it at all. And there are the ages for the people on the phone that don't have access to video. 46 to 55, 56 to 65 is the bulk of it, and then a few above that. But that ages doesn't jump off the page. The higher ages, not too bad. So, but just to give and this is by body part. You see lower back area. Oftentimes with the claims, it might affect several different body parts, but it's pretty much across the board. But again, the ones that I've seen are someone maybe bending down a landscaper to just plant or to do something on the golf course, just standard maintenance, well within their job description, just getting injured. And it happens, and oftentimes it can be expensive and a long recovery that hurts our insurance flow. I apologize for all these busy slides with all these numbers, because I'm not asking you to look at them, but I think it's worthwhile to see what the insurance company sends us. And one more thing to point out on this slide. So this is the loss history starting at 2019 up until current. And you'll see medical only, and you'll see indemnity. And this is going to tie into what Kirsten said about a return to work program. So the way that medical only claims work is that say a claim comes in, and we're able to get that individual back to work within 7 days, then it just goes on your claims history as medical only. What's so big about that is it is discounted into your EMOD at a 70% discount. Okay, so only pays 30% of that claim. That's why it's very, very, very important to get members back to work or on a limited duty program or something, so you don't get into this portion, which is the indemnity. Indemnity means loss of work, loss of time type situations, and those are charged into the calculation at 100%. So it can be very troubling, and we are very engaged with Kirsten and her team to not have indemnity claims is the goal, but at times it has it. So I reached out to the underwriter at Copper Point and said, "Hey, what are you seeing for other accounts? Let's talk, within Arizona. Let's talk nationally. What are things that they're doing?" And they said pretty much across the board in 21-22 was a challenging year. And I'm not just saying in the let's call it the club space, recreation space, across the board. A lot of my clients, I don't know if it was post-COVID or what have you, but 22 was a challenging year. He did mention that new hire injuries low in the first month, but seem to increase. I don't think that's something that we can is actionable. Similar injuries per age. He mimics that as the workforce gets older, it can be more challenging to recover from injuries. Strains are high, but he did highlight the lower back injuries, which I already discussed. But he will say that he just kept telling me that, Brian, there's been several cases that were totally outside of their control, and they get penalized for it, and there's nothing that anyone can do about it. But let's just continue to improve, and we're tracking in a good direction. So what's being done? That was where we are, but what have we been doing for the last 2 years? It's a very proactive approach to claims handling. Kirsten mentioned the team and put my name on there, but frankly, I do probably the least amount of work when it comes to the risk control component. We have dedicated risk control that do site surveys that help with education, that can, be on site, and just really pass on the knowledge to try and make sure that the programs, the processes are as dialed in from a safety perspective as possible, and that'd be working with the safety director. And also with Copper Point, yes, they have adjusters, but they also have a dedicated risk control person, similar to the person on my team, that will do all those things to try and find ways to, first of all, try and have claims not happen if we can. And if claims happen, let's try and get that injured worker the support he or she needs to get back to work as quickly as possible. So it really is a team effort. We do quarterly claims reviews, and the way that works is that we see all the claims, and each claim we'll go through and try and figure out how to just say maximize the effectiveness, whether it's closing the claim, whether it's pulling off reserves or what have you. So it's a very proactive approach with claims. And then the dedicated risk control services are already touched on that. And then Copper Point also offers what they call a nurse triage program. So if there is an accident, there's a hotline you can call directly to Copper Point and you can talk to a nurse on the best sequence of care or what to do next to help that individual who's injured. And let me just close by saying kudos to Kirsten and her team. They since she's been on board, they have been very aggressive with these. And I know the first half of my presentation was, well, look at these huge numbers and the challenge we face, and that's true. Okay, but they're doing everything to get that down. I want to be very open about that. I think that's what I have for you.
Excellent. Knowing my colleagues and we're going to have a bunch of questions for you, but before we kick that off, I love data. I know some of my colleagues do as well. You had offered the details for the EMOD formula. Look into my colleagues. Would we like to see that, all of us, or is it just me? There's a formula on page.
I can send over what we call EMOD worksheets. It shows all the claims that go into it for sure. I have that.
Please do, and you can send that over, and we'll forward it around to the entire committee.
Yeah, sure.
Another question before I turn it over to my colleagues. Without so much of the claims and the activity is personal, as you indicated, so we don't want to disclose any personal information or even risk that. Can you give us a broad example of the extraordinary type of claims that Copper Point was indicating on page 16? The type of things that are extraordinary without violating. If you can't, just say so.
Well, I have the full loss history here for the last 5 years. So it might be one of those where with Kirsten, we can extend it to the board to actually look at it directly. But if I say what happened, I think it's going to tie to probably an individual in the community.
I wouldn't want you to do that. I was trying to get like a sense.
Put it this way, it didn't have anything to do with like bending down or lifting or tripping or anything that we would say is in the normal course of operations of your organization.
Got it.
There were those though that we need to identify and just try and eliminate. I will tell you though, with my accounts that have the same amount of aggressive claims handling and safety directors and that these things just still seem to happen at times. But yeah.
Thank you. And again, it's very sensitive, some of this, so I wouldn't want you to do that. Rather than just recognizing people with questions, I just know my colleagues are going to have a bunch. And also knowing that I always, in these meetings, when I'm not sitting in the middle, I'm usually on the ends, and the people on the ends always end up going first. So today I'm going to ask David Miller in the middle to start off with questions, and we'll just go around, and if you don't have any questions as a committee member, you can just pass. Go ahead, David, you can start us off.
Thank you. Kirsten, we spoke briefly a number of months ago, and I want to compliment you on the progress you've made in implementing the safety program. I came from a very complex workplace, thousands of people, but I looked at this presentation, and it's like deja vu all over again in terms of slips, trips, and falls, sprains and strains, lower back injuries. I could have just taken the name off of this and put the name of my former workplace in, and would have looked almost exactly the same, with the exception of the age demographics. So, we have a very complex workforce. We have a lot of people doing manual labor. We have 73-year-olds on average changing beer kegs in a number of locations, okay? So I guess a concern that I have is we have one safety coordinator for 400 and something FTEs. Is that enough? I mean, that one person can be one place at a time. They're having to cover safety briefings, they're having to look at personal protective equipment, they're having to do, all sorts of evaluations of incidents. And I believe the one person we have is part-time, is that correct?
Have one safety coordinator that partners with myself And so, well, I can say that that is the sole focus of his job. It is a very large portion of my job as well.
Okay.
So we're partnering on all of those types of things. So as we see things that come up, we're tag teaming, and we have a very depth of knowledge through some of my other, folks. I've got Russ Boston on the team, who's been here for quite a while and has a depth of knowledge that we can tap into. So we're not doing it solely by ourselves, and that's where I say our team definitely partners with the entirety of the business, so that we're not just trying to do it with two people.
Right, okay, that's very good. And it is an advantage when we have employees of long standing and we have low turnover, in that over time you build a safety culture.
Correct.
Okay, and when you're constantly rotating employees out because we're trying to get the lowest cost people, that doesn't buy us anything in the long term, because you're now having to retrain people to bring them back into your safety culture. So, and we have people, and they probably may not think about it, but we have hazardous chemical handlers on staff because they have to be certified and trained in order to deal with the pools and all that other kind of stuff. We have mechanics that are having to deal with all sorts of different kind of things. We have our office workers. Again, it's a very diverse place to try and look at the safety kind of things. So, I'm assuming that everybody has access to all the personal protective equipment that they always need. They have access to the material safety data sheets that they need, all that kind of very standard things. And so, again, I would compliment you on how you've tried to move that program forward. Back injuries, it's just, I hate to say it's part of the fact of life that when you have a workforce, you're going to have that, but the reality is you're going to have that. And you can tell people how to lift, you can tell them to team lift, you can do all sorts of stuff, and it still happens.
Yeah, and we definitely look at that when we are adjusting, and I kind of spoke to that when we look at job descriptions as an example, or when somebody is coming back to a transitional job. Oftentimes we're following kind of the best guidance, which says that 50 pounds or under is okay for one person, but if you're lifting anything more than that, we're asking a team member to help with that lift. So again, it is definitely part of almost every job, and certainly all of our outside and our pool folks, they're definitely lifting on a daily basis, and our facilities assistants getting all of our tables and chairs set up.
I know in the place where I worked, we had targets for restricted work days. We had targets for days away. I don't know, do we have a sufficiently large enough population of staff that we would do that?
I don't know that we have specific targets. I can say that I did bring just, a couple of statistics. In 2022, we had lost days at 182 and 350 days of job transfer. In 2023, we had time lost days of 59. So we went from 182 to 59, and our job transfers went from 350 to 117. So we're definitely
trending in the right direction.
We're trending in the right direction. I don't know that we're large enough to say that we would have target.
Well, there was always a debate about if you set a target, did people not report
right.
in
and
order
we don't want that. We want people to report.
Right.
We want people to feel safe and feel comfortable coming to us and saying, I have a problem.
Okay. One mechanical question for Brian. You talked about the loss history, and you talked about indemnity, and you talked about medical only, and there's a third category that says incident only. What is that compared to the other two?
Yeah, I'll circle back to you, Mr. Miller, on that, but I think it's just a reporting. Is there a dollar figure associated to that? Because we'll report something as an incident only just to be familiar, unless it tracks.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, that's usually what happens there. And I should mention too to the committee and also to everyone that it was marketed this year. So we knew early on that it was going to be a challenging year, and our process is 120 days out. We start getting to work, and we went out to market. And when I say market, I mean other insurance companies. We pretty much went as wide as we could go, and it just, the numbers weren't working. So that was accomplished. And if the question might come up too is, well, what happens if Copper Point said no? And then at that point, if there's no insurance companies that willingly will want to take the account, it goes to what we call the assigned risk pool. And that's pretty much the state mandating the insurance company to take on the workers' comp. Then there's an additional surcharge at that point. So we wanted to avoid that. And 2 years ago, Copper Point threatened that, and we were able to avoid it. And I feel like our relationships in place with Copper Point are a way they feel is trending in the right direction, largely because of Kirsten's actions. So I'm really confident that we are going in the right direction. But it's worth noting too, though, that based on the EMOD explanation I gave you with the years, our really bad year is 2022. So that's going to be with us for a while. Over 2 years, that's going to be with us. So it's not like next year it's going to fall off a cliff. We really got to do the right things, and then 27 see a substantial drop is the goal.
Okay, I will make one final comment in terms of what I'll call the random events. You know, we had an employee base of 4,000 to 10,000 people at any particular moment in time. We had hundreds of safety people and industrial hygienists, which we don't have here as far as I know. Despite rigorous safety programs, things happen that are beyond your control. That is not unusual for us to be having those kind of things here. And you just have to roll with the punches because it happens. So.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. You know, we represent clients all the way up to, right, 5,000, 10,000 employees, and to the point they have full divisions that are committed to this, and they still have random occurrences. It's somewhat Murphy's Law implies there.
Okay, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
To add just one point to that, I think Brian touched on it just a bit. While we don't have a large complement of people in our safety department, we do have Copper Point and the Marsh people that have safety people on staff that we tap into. We call them. We're having conversations. Can we do something different, better? So we do have resources, and we use those resources for sure.
Thank you, Kirsten. Ray?
No additional questions.
Thank you. Dwayne?
Yeah. A couple questions here. I'll spit out all my questions, field them as the safety person. What kind of qualifications does he have? Does he have certifications for safety and so forth? Second one is, I think we're under OSHA law here. We have to comply with OSHA. Is that safety person familiar with the OSHA requirements? And then on slide 17, you talk about employee education. I guess I'd like to understand what type of training they get briefly. And then the on-site visits. I think you just mentioned Copper Point may come out. Are they visits to the places where the employees work, and are they looking for safety improvements or issues that can? So those are my questions.
So, Chris, does it work if I kind of touch on those, then you touch on your side? Yeah, and I apologize if I miss any of them. Just jump in. So when it comes to our loss control professionals, they are truly some of the best in the best. Majority of were with them, like maybe a company like Mr. Miller. They were actually assigned and kind of worked their way up through the safety, but they're all like OSHA certified, just significant amount of certifications. So most of them were with a company, and then we took them away, and they're come in, and it's just a resource. So we don't report back to the insurance company at all. We work for you. So when it comes to when we do visits, it would be teaming up with someone on Kirsten's team, and it's really what do you want to help with? You know, we can come in and we can do a mock OSHA visit and kind of show you what OSHA would point out, or it could just be, hey, let's go to a golf course and let's walk around. You know, how are you storing those chemicals? We'd really like those up the ground. You need to have this tagged or whatever. You know, I'm not a safety professional, but I've been to enough of those where I know what they look for. They pretty much are going to be like an inspector out there for them. You know, we represent thousands and thousands of clients, so they pretty much have seen it all. very well trained there. But the site visits, it's really just depending on how best to support Kirsten's team. And where we do our best work, though, is where we can kind of be, pass along information every once in a while, do a visit, but allow your team to engage with the culture, all the boots on the ground, if you will. That's where we do our best work. And then the last thing was, what was your last question? I think I missed one more, but I know a lot of that was for Kirsten. Training, yeah. So our training is very robust. It's everything from the, let's say, intellectual capital of these people that I mentioned. We have 4 people locally that's what they do is risk control, and they work as a team. But on top of that, we have what we call our Succeed platform that is a vast amount of information, whether it's training for new hires. We have videos in Spanish and English for proper lift, ladder safety, trench safety, the whole 9 yards we have access to, and that's free to you. That's at no cost. So a lot of material online, processes, procedures, employee handbooks, and then the actual people themselves.
So great questions. The safety coordinator did come to us from a military background and was part of the safety team and ran safety for his department, so definitely has that background. When he came on board, I asked him to go through the OSHA certification classes, which he successfully did 2 of, and we'll keep those certifications up to date. As far as training, we do have onboarding training when a new hire comes to us, and there are 46 different opportunities for training that people are assigned now. If you're an admin person, you're probably not going to be given information or asked to do the training on solvent safety, but you would have all of the things that touch base or that person might run into while they're employed with us. We also, to the point, we have the Succeed. We work with Todd and his group and Russ when we have heat exhaustion, when we're getting ready to get into the hot season. There are trainings that his supervisors provide to his groups or their groups. So both Todd and Pat, we talk about bee safety. What happens when you run into or might encounter some bees on the golf courses or around the swimming pool area. So we are doing those proactively. If there happens to be a topic that we deem important, we can push that out to the specific group that is asking for it or that we've identified during our safety training programs. Did I touch on all of your questions?
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Lynn?
Thank you. Yes, my question's basically for Kirsten. How successful are we in finding light duty jobs for these people who are injured on the job?
We are very successful. And the reason that we're successful is because we have a great team of managers on staff, and we can reach out and talk to them about the actual limited duty or restricted duty that they have. And we're looking not just to have someone do some task, but to make sure that it's a value add to the business. So it may be that somebody in admin needs, 3,000 things stapled. Maybe we have somebody that can do some stapling because they've got an injury to a knee. But we have not had, trying to think, we have not had any opportunities that we were not able to place into a transitional duty in the past year and a half.
Very good. And I kind of have a part 2 to that, and it's not necessarily related to workman's comp, but those employees, knowing that we're looking at an average age of about 76 years old who are having knee replacements, back surgeries, that type of thing, they're off for a pretty long time. And that costs Sun City West some extra money for their replacement while they're off. Is there any attempt to find light duty work for those people so they can come back to work sooner and maybe have someone else step into their position?
Great question. So if it is not work comp, that's a whole separate kind of program, and that would fall under the Family Medical Leave Act. And we also have programs in place that we're having those conversations. So for instance, if someone had to have a knee replaced, they may qualify under the FMLA. And so what that does is it provides two things to an employee. They have to meet the qualifications, but if they meet those qualifications, they have job protection and benefits protection. So if that happens, then they go away, and when they're ready to come back, they come back, and we work with the work group to reassign whatever it is that they're doing at that time, and then they have rights to job restoration. If they don't happen to be eligible because perhaps they're a part-time employee, and in order to be eligible, you have to have worked 1,250 hours in the preceding 12 months, we will still work with that person, and we will talk about when you are ready to come back. We will, do our best to find a position for you, and what that looks like. It may be that they can't come back as, a starter on the golf course, but they could come back as a monitor. And so we would help them look at any potential open jobs and keep that in mind when we have something that opens up.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Bosak? Gary?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I drew the short straw today. I'm the scribe, so some of my questions are trying to figure out what I want to put in the minutes, okay? Do you know Scott Ragland?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm looking at last year's presentation that he made to us, and it had a lot of information on it that for me was easier to understand, and I just wanted to verify some of the information I'm looking at. The current premium for 2023 was shown as $14.91. I assume that's a month.
So I think maybe we're missing.
What I'm trying to get to something. What I didn't see in this presentation is what were we paying, what are we going to be paying as a result of all the changes?
Oh, that was in the first slide.
And it's,
I can back up. It's, I'll get it.
Slide 3?
Sorry, yeah, not first slide, the second slide. Yeah, you're paying $238,234, and that's just pre-audit though, so it's going to depend on the audited payroll.
okay, and what was that an increase from?
I got it right here. No, it was I showed their premium last year was $148,377. That's what I have.
So 90,000. Yeah, we're obviously getting bombarded in every element of insurance in the community, and those numbers I want to include in the minutes because that kind of says it all. And
Oh, definitely.
and it reflects not so much on the work that's been done, but on the history of it. And my other question was going to be, you already answered, how the year of 2021 continues to haunt us, or 2022 rather, and dropping off a year is the way it's done in the industry, I expect, and so we're going to live with that for a period of time. But is there a reason why they do that? I mean, we're so current, and so, I mean, it's convenient for them, I guess, more than anything else, but it's so historic, and why you should be haunted for such a long period of time for an aberration.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Well, we like it less.
I've never liked it. I think especially with ones that I feel it should be a little bit. I don't want to say subjective because we know where that would go. It'd be a disaster too. I think it's just the best of what's available, and they're just kind of rolling with it. I would like to have it be where if you have this claim that has, let's just say, really nothing to do with operations or anything or something that was out of your control, that you could maybe petition to get that thrown out of your experience modification. But I agree with you. I would love to have it be somewhat of an indicator of current and the present, but we just don't have a better model. And frankly, this is a big, government, if you will, institutions that it's like turning a battleship. But in the industry, we would love to see them go away from experience modifications.
Who's the driver of that? What organization?
Well, it's the NCCI, so it's the National
okay.
Council on
That's what I thought.
Compensation Insurance, and it gets up into, really national levels at that point. There are some states that do it themselves. There's 4 monopolistic states where they control all workers' comp, where it just goes through the state. There's insurance companies aren't even involved. And there's other states that have their own rating bureaus, so they pulled away from NCCI. But in my experience, they're worse than NCCI, especially California. It's a disaster. But I would love to see a better way of doing it, Mr. Bosak, but it's just not what we have.
On page 15, you show, and I appreciate the way you describe the indemnities versus the medical only. We're really in great shape with the indemnities, except for that 2022 year. The increase, the amount of increase that's driven for the premium in total, it would seem almost all of that is driven by the indemnities, or the, yes, correct?
Yeah, it all goes into the formula, but yeah, because the medical onlys are reduced at 70%.
Right.
It really, indemnity is what can crush you, can really hurt
That's the
you.
100%?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. That's why, to Kirsten's point, if we can do anything, I know she said to get it, people doing what makes a lot of sense for the community, but frankly, for mine, we have people that are seatbelt monitors, just if we can get them back going so you don't hit the EMOD. And that's just purely from a business standpoint, not from a, what works for you guys from a business standpoint.
And the number on that page, the 1,072,000, what's the significance of that? Is it just 19 is when you picked up our account? Is that what that reflects? Or?
Well, no, in general, what we do loss history-wise, you go back about 5 years is what
Okay.
we speak to. I provided to the team, I think, Copper Point all the way back to, I think it's 2012 or 2013. There was one year where we jumped, what was that, 4 or 5 years ago, to AmTrust, and that did not go well from a service standpoint and pretty much across the board. But I provided claims history all the way back till 2012, 2013.
Okay, thank you. Kristen, just a really a large kudo to you and your team. You brought this whole activity to another level, and we can't thank you enough for the work that you do.
Well, I appreciate that, and I do want to call out all of my team members that are sitting here in the audience, because it really is truly a team effort, and I couldn't do it without them.
Yeah, a big change from last year's presentation for those of us who are privy to that. So
I have one more question, if I could.
we're going to go to Frank Bagnotto first,
Okay.
because you've already had a chance.
Forgot
So
about Frank.
I will never forget about you, Frank. Well, never is a big word. Frank, you're up next. Any questions from you before we go back to David?
I am happy to cede my time back to David.
Thank you, sir. David?
So, Kirsten, when we hire for a position, do we do a physical evaluation before they're hired?
We do not.
Should we?
I've worked in a position before where we did, where it was, the purpose of that was that we had people on remote fishing boats, and so it made sense to understand what their physical capabilities were, considering that they would be well past a 3-mile limit and any kind of health care. I don't think that that probably makes the best sense for the types of positions that we have here. We do have the physical capacities listed in every single job description, and when people are being hired into those positions, the supervisors, the leads, the managers are making sure that they're having those conversations. You do understand that you will be standing 90% of your day. Is there anything that you need? And we ask, it's right up front, do you need an accommodation to perform the essential functions of your job? So we're really relying on the person to understand what that job description is, educate them about what that job is, and have them go forth.
And maybe we're not allowed to do this, but when someone applies, do we get their past medical history?
Absolutely not, no.
Okay, all right, I didn't think you could, so.
No.
All right, thank you.
Christine,
Yes,
Frank,
Brian had some.
Oh, go ahead. I'm so
So,
sorry.
Mr. Miller, one thing to add there, and we did play around with this because we would say, especially in the workers' comp realm, let's not hire your next back claim. We see it all the time where someone might be injured, they get hired, and then next thing you know, they're on work comp, and it can be a challenge. So there is, and I'll follow up with Kirsten more information on this, but you cannot discriminate, and as long as you have the full block, like let's just say anyone that works outside or anyone that's a landscaper, there are things to do pre-hire to assess if they're able to meet a job description. And we've had it hold up in court now for the last 5 or so years, so that might be something to consider. It's all kind of through pneumatics and different ways to maybe look at that. We don't have too many clients that did it because it was cost prohibitive, but something to possibly consider. I'll do some more digging and I'll pass that on to Kirsten.
Thank you. One final, since and we're about to open this up, by the way, to owner member comments as well. So just so you're ready. I believe this might be for, well, it's for either of you. Since we're budget and finance, I'm wondering, so much of this is really leading indicators, as you were mentioning, right, Brian? It's sort of the rear view of we're paying for past sins or what have you. Sort of lagging indicators, I should say. Are there any leading indicators beyond what Kirsten was mentioning, like number of lost days? We're improving on that and so forth. Are there any others that we can be looking at as we're continuing to improve?
Yeah, I think Kirsten did touch on it, just about the lost days, and it's trending. I think the percentage of getting claims closed aggressively and getting reserves down, that's just trending better, I would say, over the last few years. So that, and then just the engagement level, oftentimes what we see is when we kind of turn around the ship, if you will, when you have the engagement at the local org level, that's where it can be good. But Mr. Miller's point, there could always be that random one that hits you.
Exactly.
But I would say the leading indicators are trending in the right direction. Over the last week, I probably touched base with Copper Point probably 15 times, and he just kept hammering that point that, hey, we really know they're doing the right things, and we want to support them on this, but that's probably what I have.
Okay, thank you. So are there any owner residents who have any questions on this topic in the room?
Christine, it's Frank. I do have one question that follows up on what David was asking. if I
Sure,
could.
please, go right ahead, Frank.
So question I have is, we put ourselves out there as an alcohol and drug-free workplace. There was a time when we would drug test all potential new hires. What are we doing now, given the change in the law in Arizona, which makes marijuana's recreational legal?
That is a good question. We still are participating and have all new hires go through both a drug and drug test before they are hired. And we do have occasion where someone may or may not test positive for marijuana specifically, because they are allowed in the state of Arizona to partake in that activity. We do look at the amount, and if there's any question or concern, we do have conversations with them to make sure that they understand that if they are employed with us, that they cannot come to work under the influence of any said drug. And that includes prescription medications as well.
Thank you.
A follow-up to that, then, if someone were to be injured on the job, would we be allowed by law to submit them to a drug test to determine if in fact they were impaired while they were at work?
So very good question. And yes, we do. And yes, they are subjected to both an alcohol and a drug test in the initial screening. So that is something that all employees partake in.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you for doing a good job.
Yeah, thank you. I think we all lend our kudos to you and your team, Kirsten, so thanks for that. So any others from the committee? Great. Sir?
Hi, Chris Waller, 140558. First, thanks for the presentation, very informative. This might, Kristen, you might be able to answer this. Do we have sort of a safety lead in each facility? And I don't mean a safety professional. I mean an employee that would accept some responsibility to say, listen, you know, if you have a concern, come to me, and then that person can build a rapport with our safety coordinator and feel comfortable. I'm thinking if I were a 1 or 2 month employee, I might hesitate taking a giant leap to report just a concern that I might have. Is that something we have in process?
Absolutely. So I spoke about the safety committee, and again, each facility has their facility leads, for example, at the rec centers. So those folks, if there is any questions or concerns, we talk to them. Yes, please let us know if you have any things that you identify. And we're tasking people from our monitors to our managers to make sure that if you see something, say something. So definitely we empower people to step forward and let us know.
Okay, so it's the facility leads, that's just another one of their responsibilities? It's not a,
Every single one of our facility leads, our managers, our director pieces, across the board, they all have responsibility to safety. So for instance, when we get ready to go into the hot season, Todd sits down with his leads and makes sure that we go through things like lightning strikes and heat exhaustion and heat stroke, bees, making sure that they're having current, up-to-date further training, and we do that in mostly 2 languages, so we have it available in English and Spanish. But we're tasking each work group to manage that.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. For the
Any
question.
other questions in the room? Then we'll go to online. Bruce Lee's 135422. The presentation provided by Kirsten speaks primarily about reactive measures taken by RCSDW HR safety in regards to workman's comp. Employee health and safety should be proactive. Thanks for the comment, Bruce. Second, from Mr. Lees is, what safety programs or training is provided to employees upon hire during employment to reduce lost time injuries? I believe you've spoken to some of those already.
I'm happy to speak to those again.
Real quick, I think this might
Very
have come in
quickly.
early. Yeah.
So we are very proactive. We're talking about when things land into the workers' comp arena, or we have something that raises up to a work comp issue. But as far as the training, every new hire goes through training, and if there's job-specific pieces that they need to have for training, they're given that training as well. But it is definitely a proactive stance. We have our safety training committee that works to prevent as well as to mitigate, and so we're definitely proactive on that point.
Thank you. And his final question, Bruce Lees, who is responsible for tracking workplace injuries and documenting OSHA 300 forms? And are these records available to review?
Yes, so they are posted in the facilities. The 300 goes up on February 1st and is posted until the April 30th. And so those are posted, and that is left up to the HR staff, myself, and the safety coordinator.
Thank you, Kirsten. So with that, I believe that wraps up the topic. Thank you so much on behalf of all of us, Brian, for the incredible work to advocate for us. I know that a lot of work, you spoke to this, but a lot of work went into putting this out to bid, trying to help us contain this. So thank you for all of that. And of course, Kirsten, we thank you again for you and your team.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for your time.
So with that, we'll move on to topic 3.02, our proposed capital budget and March revisions. While we prepare for that, and of course we know Carl very well, just want to say for the benefit of our committee, we've been hearing a lot of this through the year, and Carl's been great about pointing out changes, and I'm sure you're going to do the same. Just remember that between this meeting and the meeting that comes up in 2 weeks, at that meeting, Dick's goal for all of us is to have an agreed upon consensus of the items in the capital budget that we want to pull out, meaning it could be something that you believe the governing board needs to look at more closely or something we want to remove. They usually falls into that removal category. I believe many of us have been thinking about this for 6 months or so. Nonetheless, let's keep an open mind, listen to Carl's presentation. When he's done, we'll start that conversation. If we need more time at the following meeting, we will finalize that at our next one, just so you know what's upcoming. The sooner we can let Carl and his team know what's on our mind, and the governing board as well, the easier it will be for them. So Carl, without further ado.
Thank you, Director Novello and BNF committee and members of the audience. This is month 7. I have a few parts to this presentation today. Our first document that we'll be reviewing is the overall proposed capital budget for FY 24-25. This is the document that shows all categories of new reserve study items, divided between other departments and golf, and then capital allowances. The purpose of this particular document shows change month to month. I just mentioned we are in month 7th review. Later on in my presentation, we are also starting March, which we have narrowed down this list to discussions of $100,000 and greater. But in this first opening document, I will provide any information about changes that have come from the previous months. So starting off in the tan section, we have our new capital items. There are no changes to this category. And the only thing that I would like to add comment to, though, in the new category is a line item called the Pickleball Monitor Station for $30,000. I thought it'd be important, staff agrees, that I share some additional information. This project request that is new came from our yearly Properties Committee walks. As we were reviewing the area over at Palm Ridge, specifically the pickleball court areas, it was noticed that we have staff that works there 4 days a week, 4 hours a day, and monitors and checks in pickleball players. So it was a warm day when we were doing our walk, and that was in October, so it wasn't as warm as it could be. But the committee definitely recognized a possible need to provide that employee a shelter, which would have been a reasonable purchase as expressed in this new capital item. So, you know, a guard shack, if you will, with air conditioning and electricity and the abilities to have the computer system to check people in. As we've gone along in this budget season and made sure that we had everything for that, you know, the component that CFO Cliff Swan and his team had to also make sure that we talked about was employee staffing. So right now, as I mentioned, we do a 7 a.m. to 11 a.m., 4 days a week monitoring. If we were to put that guard booth there for $30,000, the assumption is that we're going to go to 5 employees, 20 hours a week, that are hourly part-time employees. Our current expenditure for employees in that area is $11,939. Adding that booth, we would be going to adding 98 hours of coverage, and that would add $62,681 in employee costs. So we thought it important that we not just discuss the cost of the booth, but the impact to hourly part-time employees needed to manage that.
Gary already got those. Could you repeat those numbers one more time for us?
Absolutely. Approximately right now, our investment is approximately $11,939. Now that is my math. That is not Cliff's math or the accounting team's math, but that's basically my layman's terms for factoring a $14.35 hourly rate, 4 days a week, 4 hours a day.
Estimates. This is fine.
Yeah.
We get it.
Okay,
Thank you.
so to man that, staff that full time, we would need to go to 5 staff members at 20 hours a week, and that would be an impact of $62,681 per my estimation. Now, if we carry that conversation from Palm Ridge over to R.H. Johnson, the purpose of this is to have a monitor checking in our users and guests for pickleball. We already have a tennis tower station that is part-time staffed, and that staffing for this is currently 5:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m., 6 days a week, an impact of $22,386 approximately. The idea originally was to make sure both of these facilities, one needing a guard shack and one where it already has a tennis tower, having the same philosophy of full-time coverage for the purpose of checking in and understanding who our users are, those facilities. So over at R.H. Johnson, that impact would be $59,696 additional per year. So the overall budget impact for both locations, Palm Ridge and R.H. Johnson, would come to approximately $122,000. So that's just something I think as staff that we need to get that across if we were going to determine on moving forward on this Palm Ridge monitor station. Currently, those 8 hourly part-time employees are not in CFO Swan's projection for the annual budget that you've been given the information so far. That's all I've got to comment on that. I'm going to move on to reserve study items in the blue category. I have a few changes. Todd and the accounting team have done more work on making sure that we're making the right purchases for the year. So if we go down to landscaping vehicles, that has been reduced by 1 more vehicle. They've found an efficiency in their vehicle purchases or eliminating an item. So the budget from February to March has been reduced to $56,903. Moving on to the next change. I might need a little clarification. This was a last-minute change. Maybe Cliff or Pete can help me with this, but the admin department of IT requesting 3 servers, RDS system for TEG point of sale at an added cost to the budget of $29,172. And in the reserve study items for all departments other than golf, those are the only changes. We're going to move on to the green reserve study items. Our only change is Todd Petty and the accounting team have recognized that they did not have the Trail Ridge Lakeshore Line hardscape included in the budget, which is an add of $48,000. Other than that, there are no additional changes to that portion of the golf reserve study list. And the final area is allowances. There are no changes to the original $420,000 request we started the year off. Do you have any questions?
In terms of the questions, I think it might be, are there any questions from the committee on changes before we start discussing potential items? So we'll start again. This time, why don't we start with you, Gary, and we'll go around the table? And we'll ask every member of the committee again to go in turn. Go ahead.
Todd, is the 48,000 for Trail Ridge number 3, is that the rock like on number 18 at Grandview as opposed to the walls? I know the walls are a lot more expensive than this, but that's what the rock is?
Yeah, that's what we're looking at, a riprap application for that lake. And also along with that, we would do a waterborne treatment of ESS 13, which is the sealant for seepage control.
So I know it's too soon to tell that you've gotten any results from what you did at Grandview, but much, much less expensive to do what you did at Grandview than putting the walls up. Is that something you see going forward being used more often than not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are some lakes that we have on the schedule over the next 5 years that would require a split face block wall and riprap application together. And so those would be like up against a tee or a green area, the turf areas, and maybe a small block wall, and then just tie that into the riprap.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Lynn, why don't you go next?
Carl, going back to the monitor station that they're looking at putting in, I'm wondering about why we aren't considering, or are we considering, as other clubs, charter clubs have their own monitors and we don't pay for them. And for all the hours that we are open, we are required to have a monitor there for no pay. I'm wondering if perhaps pickleball shouldn't be doing the same thing. Yes, I agree we need to give them some kind of shade structure in this heat. However, I wonder if that should actually be a cost of the rec center.
So,
To jump in as the chair, sorry. Before you begin, remember, we all need to remember, although it's a vibe, we'll let Carl answer the question. This is a service to the entire community. It's not just a club. It's not a club facility. Okay, so this is equivalent to having.
Understood.
Yeah, but Again, Carl, I'm sorry.
It's a very good question, and staff has posed that question on both points, and sometimes we, in an attempt to make great decisions, the point that Director Novello brought up is, yes, we are an amenity to all. It's not always a pickleball function, so there will be gaps if that was the mindset of having it self-monitored by the user groups. So the club is a large function there, but not 100%. So, and this discussion is what we were hoping for, so that we could bring all that to light. So the differences between how the club uses their facilities, whether it's tennis or pickleball, and what is open use to our members.
Thank you. I just hope that there is some consideration for the time that they have tournaments and specific for the club, that is considered, that they're covered.
And
But
mind you,
thank
my point of bringing this up is not about eliminating the guard check per se. It's about the fact that it comes with a dual expense.
A great
you.
point from both of you. Thank you, Lynn. We'll go to, I was looking at Cliff. No questions from you. Dwayne, you're next.
It's about the monitoring stations. I assume we're trying to implement this because maybe we have a lot of guests that are not paying the guest fee. And if that's the main driver, have we looked at, if we put the station there, would we get more guest fees to offset the cost of labor to man the monitoring station or anything like that? Or what are the drivers behind this?
Very good point. The primary number one driver was about making sure that an employee sitting outside was taken care of and safe in the elements that they work. Number two, your point is excellent. So yes, we definitely looked at who is using our facilities. Are people sneaking in? Are we collecting our guest fees? Even with that assumption that there are fees maybe not being paid appropriately or others going around the hours of a monitored time frame, we don't believe that there's an ROI to this equation. We don't believe that the fees that we're missing, if you will, are going to make up for these expenses that I'm sharing with you. So the question comes down to is, regardless of the expense, should we be fully monitoring it or not?
Thank you. Ray? Thank you. David? Oh, nothing. Thought you did. So Frank, you're up next. Questions?
Yeah, let's stay with the monitoring station because it's new on the budget. So Carl, if I heard you correctly, it is not anticipated that the collection of the guest fees will come to anywhere near what the cost will be to monitor, to have a monitor at that station. Is that correct?
Oh, Frank, we're going to go to Cliff to answer that one,
Okay.
if he can.
Yes, that's correct, Frank. The amount of revenue, at least that we know of course. So there's things that obviously we don't know of, but it's a very, very small amount. We put a pencil to it, and I want to say that it amounted to less than $5,000 in a full year of what we know about. And what we do know about can be addressed in other ways so that we can capture that revenue versus posting a monitor in that facility. So, and then I will say that we will be requesting during club times that the clubs do monitor the facility during club times.
And things like tournaments and such, I would imagine as well.
Yes.
What is the current procedure for guests to check in at Liberty Courts? We'll just use that for now.
Frank, although, again, because all questions are directed to the chair, the current procedure, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we ask that guests be checked in at the desk at Palm Ridge, the main desk. So whether or not that happens in terms of collecting fees, is that question. Am I correct there?
That is correct.
So we've got potentially, at least in the first 12 months, about a $68,000 wages cost that we don't have now, a number that will grow exponentially over the years, but yet we're installing a system that isn't even going to begin to cover the cost of capturing the guest fees. We're not even going to be coming close to it. So I have to ask, why are we going to do this?
The question is for us to determine, but one of the things that I just heard Carl say is that this came up through our own residents, through our properties committee. During their assessment and their walk around, they felt that this was an important thing to have. So it's, as all the committees will, if it's something that we have questions about, this is the time. We're all asking a lot of questions. We can identify this as a potential something that we would recommend to the governing board to look at again. Is this something that did come up? I know that we have a few folks from properties here in the room as well, but is this something that was this staff generated, or was it from the committee, or both?
No, this fully came about on our property tours that we do of every rec center. And that particular day, like I said, I think there was probably a group of 11 plus myself and Russ Boston leading the tour. And the question was posed by the properties committee to explain what the circumstances of our monitoring and the staff member sitting outside. And that's where the discussion came. And it sounded like a great idea to make sure that our employees are safe and healthy in an environment like everywhere else they have a monitor opportunity. And but then again, when we go down the road and we have to discuss about, manning that, it's not just a $30,000 guard shack. So you have to see the full picture.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks as well for the questions. The next step for the committee is to start identifying the pullouts. Before we get there, and when I say the pullouts, I'm sorry, I'm speaking in shorthand. The next step is for us to identify items on the capital improvement project list that we feel we should remove from the list. And if there's something that we're not even sure, maybe it's just something that we believe should be elevated to the governing board for more discussion, this is the time to identify those as well. So please consider that committee. But before we do that, I want to open it up. If there are any questions on this list and on the changes, any questions from our owner residents, I know we have one online or a couple online already. So come on up and ask the questions, and then we'll have another round of comments when we finish discussing identifying those items.
Hi, Nick Turner, 131829. I'm a member of the Childhood Clubs Committee, so I'd like to make it clear I'm not speaking on behalf of that committee at the moment. I'm just speaking as an individual. I don't see how the provision or lack of provision of a guard shack at Palm Ridge has any bearing on the manning of the monitor station in the tennis tower. I just don't see how that connection can be made. There was a request from the Properties Committee that the existing monitor, currently employed, currently budgeted, be given an environmentally safe place to do their work. And that's $30,000, and that's in this budget. I don't see how we then leap to over $100,000 worth of additional salary and manning for that booth and for the tennis tower. Those are two completely separate issues that need to be dealt with in a completely separate way. The provision of the guard shack has absolutely nothing to do with the manning of the tennis tower. It has nothing to do with the hours of monitoring. It's for an existing person who is in difficult conditions during the summer when they're doing their job. And I think these things need to be separated. There's a different question as to whether the chartered clubs involved who have that space on a dedicated basis for part of the day, whether they themselves should be required to monitor. And we should also note that if it is during club hours, there is no external non-resident guest fee to be made. Those guests play under the bylaws of the club and what the club allows and doesn't allow for their guests. So the guest fees would only be collected during non-club hours. And those differences need to be understood when it comes to managing this situation.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, you can stay there for a moment to see if there's an answer. Thank you very much, Mr. Turner. One of the things that you pointed out, and I think it is, again, worth our committee and the residents to understand, is that this is an existing position for monitoring that facility, and this shelter was designated for that one existing position. We have an existing shelter at the tennis facility at R.H. Johnson that is for the same purpose. So it is important to understand that this is not something that was just pulled out of the sky, and it's not a desire. There was a lot of thought that went into this from the Properties Committee. I was part of that tour, although not part of the committee. A couple of us were, I think. We were invited to go along, so thank you for pointing that out. I would like to ask Carl, since you pointed out all the staffing numbers, why the correlation and why it was sort of a bit of a shock and awe announcement. So maybe you can help us understand why that was so important.
Sure, there's plenty of angles of conversation we could have on this subject matter. Mm-hmm. We certainly could provide a guard check per the need of keeping an employee safe, and I'm definitely a proponent of that. So if that employee is outside, I think this was a great observance and a good opportunity to correct that. The question then would come in: do you want to stay the course and maintain it from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. 4 days a week? The conversation that operations has had is, seems a little like there's some holes in that schedule. Why wouldn't that be performed then if we had the environment, 7 days a week? And then again, I appreciate the comments from Mr. Turner. There is no real relevance in this guard check versus R.H. Johnson Tennis, but this is Budget and Finance Committee, so all financial decisions that would come from these discussions should be presented here. I wouldn't have necessarily brought this up at Properties from the R.H. Johnson Tennis Tower point of view, but if we're going to have this idea of 7 days a week coverage in any form, the holes exist also at R.H. Johnson Tennis for the same purpose, mm-hmm. the same control methods, if you will, for making sure that the right people are coming into our facilities, using it, paying their fees, even if there is not a great return of investment on that. I mean, it is an amenity. We recognize that as staff. Is it an amenity that you want to staff in this function for these costs?
Thank you. Is that any other further? I know we didn't answer your question. You were just pointing this out to us, yeah. Correct? Thank you for saying just in case. And I know a couple of the committee members had some questions. I hope that helped as well.
Deborah Johnson, 130208. I'm going to share a little bit here. 24 years ago, I was in Alaska and was going into Skagway, pulled up to where we go from Canada into Alaska, and there was nobody at the checkpoint. You went to a camera, you spoke into the camera, you showed them your passport, and then you were able to go in. If you didn't do this, then somebody showed up to check on you. I'm asking that maybe we think outside the box. I mean, today's technology is far greater than it was 24 years ago. That maybe we can do a swipe card or something, and we can do this in different places such as the pickleball, the dog park, and other areas that maybe we can capture some of these issues. That's my first thing. And my second thing is in the blue section, it showed the finance department cubicle replacement of 31,200. I haven't been into the finance department, so I don't know how big it is or how many people you have in there, but it seems like $31,200 is quite a large amount of money for cubicle walls. Am I wrong?
No, it's actually, it's a reasonable cost. It doesn't, it's not cheap, but cubicles are expensive. They are very expensive, actually, and they come in different levels. I know that the accounting team has looked at, medium to low-cost methods there. The room is got approximately 6 cubicles, and this price was par to our redevelopment of the member services area, not member services, but the, I'm sorry, behind the village store, our CC&R's department. So virtually the same kind of product, and the team would be going out to 3 bids, just like anything else that needs to be purchased, but it really is that expensive for cubicles.
Yeah, I worked for the government, and we had cubicle walls. Those things last forever, so I would ask the committee and the governing board to question why we need to replace all of cubicle walls when typically they last forever. Just a comment.
I certainly
Thank you.
invite you to come and look at them. They're in very poor shape. They are original to the office. And last year when we did our flooring, all of the tearing them down and putting them back together showed all of its wear and tear. So most of them are broken.
Thank you,
I hope that
Carl, and
helps.
thank you very much for your comment. We have one more person coming to the microphone.
Good morning. My name is Larry Plaster, 130627. I'm the president of the tennis club. I just want to clarify once again, as Nick said, I have trouble understanding how we get to a $100,000 salary increase for the tennis tower from a proposal to put an environmental station for the monitor at the pickleball club. So I'm trying to understand, Carl, you're saying that if we're going to be consistent and have 7 day a week, 8, 10-hour a day monitors at the pickleball club, that we should make the step to do that at the tennis club. Because I don't see where the pickleball club has anything to do with the tennis monitor, as Nick pointed out.
Actually, I'll take the question first, and then we'll. Carl was presenting a series of staffing numbers to us. One of them that we need to pay attention to is what we have today, right? So in terms of whether or not there's an increase, if we wanted to increase staffing, those numbers are not included in anybody's operational budget today. Beyond that, me personally, sitting here, I don't hear any correlation, but Carl and team were just calculating. So Carl, is that, am I hearing that correctly?
That is correct. It's again, trying to show the assumptions that we discussed so that we make sure that we're covered in this budget. We don't have many weeks or months left to implement staff. And again, the thought process was, should we do Palm Ridge or do R.H. Johnson equal to Palm Ridge or not? But
that's done.
You wouldn't be able to make the decision if I didn't bring it to light today.
That's right, and we thank you for bringing that to full light. But I don't see any correlation either, specifically. Although it's just information to share.
Yeah,
Does that answer?
Yeah, we have a monitor 6 days a week, 5:30 to 10:30. There are holes in the afternoon. There's no question about it. That we have people showing up from Surprise Tennis Center, walking in and using the courts. So additional monitors may be justified. I just don't want it tied to pickleball's facility that should have nothing to do with that. So, okay.
Thank you for clarifying. Are there any other questions in the room before we go to online?
Christine, Carol, just so I'm going to confirm for the minutes, you're talking 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. coverage, correct? Is what generated those dollars?
Um,
No, that was full-time.
Currently,
That was if we
currently
went to
we are
full-time.
7 to 11, I'm sorry, Director.
It was, the current coverage is 4 days a week, 7 to 11. The big numbers were if a request was then made to increase that to
Full-time.
full-time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. Sorry to interrupt you. Then the next is, we'll go to online then, unless any other committee member have another follow-up. So going to online, Bruce Lees, 135422, asks a very similar question. Many clubs require members to volunteer hours to the club for monitoring or checking in. Pickleball has nearly 2,000 members. Why can't the club provide monitors? As we addressed, Bruce, or as we tried to address, this is a facility that's open to all of our members, all of our owner members, and there will be discussions about for during club time, perhaps adding or expanding the existing check-in procedures there. So so this is something that goes beyond merely a club room, but both Lynn Kellis and other folks have asked that question. Gary Bach asks, Gary Bach 135, oh gosh, I have to get closer, 135435. So one concern is non-Sun City West residents using courts. Do we have numbers on non-residential usage today? Carl, do we have those?
I do not.
Okay. I believe when we don't have the conclusive numbers, Mr. Bach, but our CFO, Cliff Swan, did mention some of the break-even type of things. So I hope that might have answered some of the questions, but it's something that deserves some question. Just note again, we've said it a few times, the monitor shack would be for the existing staff, which is their 7 to 11, 4 days a week, the proposed monitoring shack. So that being said, we've had a series of questions from us. Now comes the part that we've been discussing, I guess, for about 7 months. Does the committee feel we can take a first cut at identifying our items that we would like to remove now? Does anybody have a concern about it? Otherwise, we'll just start going around, and Gary, I'll try to help keep track as well, but if we can just keep track of, we'll go around and ask each person on the committee to identify items that they feel should be removed or further scrutinized. And we'll just go through this section by section, and I assume we've all been doing our homework. Again, if there's any concern in the end about finalizing this, we'll address it at the end in terms of if we need more time. So let's start going through the list. We'll start with starting with the new projects, and you can go through the entire thing. Frank, we're going to start with you. Mr. Bagnato might have stepped away from his microphone, so why don't we go to you, Gary. We'll start so that you can help us keep notes from that point on, if you wouldn't mind. Any items on here that you think we should pull out?
No,
or?
None.
Okay. Lynn?
I am just, yes, I think we should pull out Lizard Acres. I don't see where it's going to be that big a benefit. I was hoping that maybe we could have a little more conversation about it so I could understand it more thoroughly.
Okay. As we go through, just to interrupt you for a moment, we can just identify the items as you were saying. If we feel that we need more conversation, we can come back and do that at our next meeting if we wish. All right.
Thank you.
So any other items as you look at the next couple of pages?
No, again, I just have questions regarding some of the other items that I'd love to discuss at a later time.
Okay, if they're, we will finalize the discussions at our next session on the
Thank you.
2 weeks from today. Dwayne?
Yes, I have a couple here that I'd like to talk about, and it's really, Gary and I had a conversation before the meeting started, but some of these, it's the Lizard Acres, it's the library expansion, big new projects, right? Not just maintenance items.
All of them,
But-
the entire list, all, what do we have here?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 6 pages.
Yeah, these are the only two I want to talk about. It would be nice if this committee knew what the governing board's vision is for the community
Mhm.
in the next, say, 5 years. And it kind of points to the master plan or strategic plan, whatever you want to call it. Are these expenditures on their top priority list? You know, if we're going to move forward with the library expansion, that could, I've heard up to $6 million cost for that. How are we going to pay for that? Is that on the priority list to spend that kind of money? And if it's not, then why even spend $100,000 evaluating that?
I think sorry to interrupt, Dwayne, but a number of weeks ago, this committee made a recommendation to the governing board that the governing board provide those strategic initiatives, and the governing board they chose to not do that. So each committee, we've reverted back to the existing process, which is to go through and have each committee identify the items that they would like to remove.
Okay. All right. That's all I have.
Mr. Davis? Or I could call you Ray.
The biggest question I had is, one of the other committees has already removed the Coons outfield fence, which was my top bullet point. But I agree that the Lizard Acres and the library expansion need more study.
And thank you, just to clarify, each committee is asked to identify items they would like to remove. The governing board will make the decision. So there's been no decision on whether or not that will be. So it's great for us to identify for ourselves, not just what other committees have done, but for ourselves, which items, if any, we'd like to. So thank you for doing that. You said the fence as well, right?
Yes. My comment about the fences, it's no longer on this list, but the brochure is still included in the packet.
The fence is, are you referencing is the Coons softball fence? Yes. That is in the reserve study as a asset for replacement, so you'll see that in the blue section.
Mm-hmm. It is there.
My apologies.
Would you like us to flag that? Would you like us to flag that for anything else, Ray? David?
Yeah, I would like, as many of the other committee members have done, I would like more discussion on Lizard Acres, the library expansion, and the softball fence.
Thank you. Mr. Bagnado, have you returned to your microphone?
I have. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I would like to see Lizard Acres pulled out. I absolutely want the library expansion pulled out. We've already wasted $40,000 there. As far as the rest of the items here, I can live with what we have. But so Lizard Acres and the library expansion should be taken out.
Very good. I'm going to add to that. I'd like us to take another look at the tractor with backhoe.
Are you asking for my comments about that?
No, Mr. Frank, I took your comments and I'm saying I'm going to add my own now, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
Thanks. So the tractor with backhoe would be one that I identify. And the 3 servers for IT, I'd like to flag that for removal. In the absence of a technology roadmap, I'm not comfortable with the organization spending any further money on IT at this time. I'd rather spend the money on a roadmap. Let's see.
Director Novello? Cliff, do you have any comments on that servers or an understanding? It's my apology that I don't.
I'm not asking for any comments. I'm
You
just
got it.
flagging for removal.
Very good.
But thank you very much. I do understand that there's going to be a lot of discussion, and that's the reason why I'm flagging
Okay.
it. If that's okay,
No,
that's, I'm not trying to be, I've had an opportunity to spend a bit of time in the finance department, and the cubicles are in need of replacement. So for the residents who are questioning it, I understand the comment, but you can go and I thank you very much for inviting folks to actually go and take a look. Same thing for all of the folks here. With the rest of the items, we've had a lot of time and discussion to discuss those, so I'm comfortable with what the rest of the committee has come up with. At this point, my question to my fellow committee members is, do we want to come back and take one more run through these items at our meeting on I believe it's the 19th in 2 weeks, or are we okay with the list that we've just identified, passing that on? Gary?
Now that we've created a list, what's the next step? Are the other committees doing the same thing? And
Yes.
if they are, then what happens to those lists?
Great question. Many of the other committees have already passed this information on to the governing board. The next step from all the committees is to pass this recommendation on to the governing board. The governing board will then identify decisions, start making decisions, and add to that, if there are any items that they wish to do. So that's the basic process, and flag these for potential removal and discussion. Yes, go ahead, David.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand what you were asking. So I think several of us said we wanted more discussion.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're talking about doing at the next meeting, or?
We have a choice now. We could have another discussion on the 19th, or say we're comfortable with the list. You know, my opinion, I would like us to come back and have one more discussion in 2 weeks.
And
but
I would agree with that.
Just an opinion. Okay. How does everybody else? So if we have, what do you feel, Dwayne?
Well, as far as removing these items, my opinion is, I'm not against these things. I'm not against, doing a renovation of Lizard Acres, but I would like to see more long-term planning and prioritization of these types of projects from the governing board. I'd love to see these back on the list at some point, but I would like to see more prioritization planning with the funding that we have. That's it.
I hear you, and as you guys have heard me say, I do agree. So with all the items that myself and others have identified, I can see a need for each of them, but I would like to see some discussion amongst us as well. David?
So I would like to understand, we've asked for this kind of information several times, and it's probably more a Cliff thing than a Carl thing. What's the ROI on the investment in Lizard Acres? I mean, the way I understood it in the past was we view Lizard Acres as a profit center for the rec center. Okay, basically we're running a bar. It's a public venue. Anybody can come in, whether they're a resident or not. So the real question is we're making an investment. How quickly will we see that investment get paid back?
Okay, we presented to properties. They requested us to present an ROI on Lizard Acres and the renovation. Currently, pre-renovation, Lizard Acres turns a positive cash flow of $60,000 per year. The math on the ROI, or the additional incremental revenue, and it was with a 20% increase in sales due to the renovation, that would return an additional, I want to say it was $8,000 per year for that investment. We had a long discussion. Chris, you were there at the Sports Pavilion Committee meeting. There were a lot of opinions given on it. I will say, as the rec center, we view that area as part of the bowling alley, and that it's an amenity. One of the things that we talked about was when we invested recently 350-ish thousand in new lanes and ball returns, that because it was an amenity, we didn't look at an ROI per se on that. It was just more of a, if we're going to have this, how do we enhance this and make it better for the community? So that was really the main focus on the renovation. So that's kind of how we do it. It does fortunately turn a profit, so to speak, for the community in terms of operating revenue minus operating expenses.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an enhancement to that facility.
As I recall the discussion, when I was listening in and observing the meeting, it was toward that. So it's viewed as, or the committee views this as an amenity, as an upgrade to the existing, not so much an opportunity to return on the investment.
One of the people sitting in the audience, it was kind of funny. He likened it to walking, you've got this beautiful bowling alley, and then you walk down into your basement in Milwaukee, and there's your bar. So it was kind of funny that comparison. But anyway, that's kind of how it was portrayed.
It was a little bit bigger than the bar we had in the basement of my house in New York. I will say that, but nonetheless, I think it's great questions. So just a quick query as well. We've identified some items for us to discuss. Would we like to come back and have more discussion on this in 2 weeks? The items we've identified, rather than. Again, the next step, as Gary was mentioning, the next step for us as a committee is to pass along a recommendation, a list of items for the governing board to either remove or reconsider in some way. So that's our next step. Gary?
I lack your insight from the meetings that you've had with the other governing board members, so I'm at a disadvantage from that standpoint, but it sounds to me like we've said master plan on the shelf, look at each individual project on its own merit, and go through the process of the committees, and the committees will make recommendations on accepting or rejecting the projects as they're evaluated currently.
I think just to clarify my point, the governing board didn't say master plan on the shelf. At a governing board workshop where this recommendation was passed along to the governing board in an open meeting, not a closed door meeting, an open meeting. The governing board decided at that time to not provide those strategic priorities that we requested, and instead to proceed this year with the budget process as it is, and to take the input from our operations team. I'm just passing that on.
Yeah, that's okay.
So
No, I appreciate it.
Just to clarify.
So some of the items that were on the master plan are on the current docket.
What master plan?
Well, the one that was presented to us how many years ago?
Oh, 2019.
The 6 or 7 different
Okay, I
priorities
apologize.
that the residents surveyed said they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And so some are on and some are not. So where I'm going with this is it within our purview to create our own prioritization of those projects, kind of in the dark, because we're not considering dollars and cents. We're considering importance to the community, value to the community, however you want to frame it. But if someone doesn't do that, we're going to be circling the wagons and having the same conversation all over again, which we've had numerous times since it came on board. And I don't think we know any more or less today than we did when we started. So I wholeheartedly support a conversation, excuse me, at our next meeting. But I'd just like to know what our expectation as an outcome would be, having had that conversation.
Great question. Again, the immediate output for this current budget process is to identify to the governing board the items on the capital budget list that we would recommend be removed by the governing board. So that's the immediate next step. I do hear everything that you guys are saying in terms of identifying strategic priorities. There is no master plan yet, current for 2024. We're entertaining the priorities that have come forward to us from our operations staff, and they're coming forward to us in the form of these presentations that we've received. And that's what we have to go on at this time.
Okay, so
So if we did defer this to our next meeting, it would be to have further discussion on what we want to do next as a Budget and Finance Committee.
but the end result of that discussion at our next meeting will be the currently proposed capital items that we want removed from the budget.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the,
Okay.
and it's only for the next year, so it's
understand.
not strategic at all.
I want to know what the outcome is, the expectation is.
Thank you. Are there any, so we've, if I can summarize what I have, and please, Gary, who is taking our minutes today as our Secretary Pro Tem, tell me if I got them correct. I see the committee identified Lizard Acres barroom renovation for potential removal, and we can discuss. The library expansion and renovation, tractor with backhoe, the outfield fence replacement in the softball field, the 3 servers for IT. That's what I had. Did I miss anything that you had?
Kuhn's tennis courts were mentioned.
Yes, of
and
course.
So I just put that because some other committee you said had indicated that as well. So I had that on the list.
I missed it. Thank you. So with those items, committee, would we, do we want to add this to the agenda for our meeting on the 19th? One final round of discussions before we finalize that recommendation, or would you like to move forward?
I'm in agreement with you, Christine. One more time, one more go around at the next meeting.
Thanks, Frank. Anyone opposed to that? So we will, we'll ask that the agenda we will reflect this in the agenda for the 19th to take these items. And again, we'll take the time as a committee to go back and look through the rest of these items, and if there are any others we can discuss. I'll invite any residents or owners now to come forward and add any additional observations, comments, questions. I know that we have one online already. Is there anyone in the room that has any further comment or question? While we wait for you to sign in, we do have one online just to expedite. Michelle Brunner, 127597. I believe Cliff provided an ROI on Lizard Acres upgrade at either a governing board meeting or the last budget finance meeting. It may have been around 25. That is just. It may have been around 25 to 30 years. Can you confirm? I think you just mentioned the numbers really quickly. It was at the Properties Committee is what, Michelle, that's the specific. We didn't see it here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was trying.
Okay, Jolene Piaskowski, 132268. Okay, I have a quick question about the pool decking that we're doing at Palm Ridge. Are we using the same vendor that we used at R.H. Johnson?
There's no guarantee of that. If I find multiple more sources, I will tell you that right now I don't believe there are much greater potential for it to be a different vendor. As I continue to look for other vendors, they're either a spinoff of the training from the primary vendor that came from Texas, and my vetting of those vendors is that they haven't done a project to our scope or size, and that concerns me. And understanding some of their fees, our vendor from Texas would be the lowest cost.
Okay. Have you been at the pool at R.H. Johnson? It
I
looks
have.
pretty bad.
What does
The-
pretty bad mean?
Well, by the hot tub spa, the blue stuff that it's flaking off and going into the spa. So what happens when that happens? Does that hurt the filtering system? I mean, I have pictures, there's areas where the rubber is actually off and it's bare cement, whatever's underneath that. It's not even a year old. So I'm just wondering if this rubberized coating that we have decided to do is something that we really want to continue at other pools. Just asking, because it doesn't seem to be giving us the dollar for the return. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I know it cost us $200,000, and I know it's not even a year old. So help me understand.
So we're fully aware of the areas that are flaking. We are aware of the areas that never had a little bit of coating due to our punch list completion timeline and reopening of the pool. You know, people will be people. They like to pick at things. I personally saw that observance myself. So the primary reason it's not fixed to date, and it can be fixed, is use. I need a drying window. I need to do those patches. I'm going to affect high season use. It's insignificant to, you know, it's not affecting anybody. It's just unsightly. So would you agree with it? It's not affecting anybody?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
I just don't know if we need to spend another $186,000 and another 71 if we don't know if it's going to wear better. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, because right now, what is at Palm Ridge?
So over the last 7 years of identifying what's the best flooring solutions for our pool decks, you know, we've referred back to the understanding of our acrylic deck that we had. At a portion of the deck at R.H. Johnson was acrylic. A portion was cool deck, and it's a dissimilar surface. They both look the same. They both look like cool deck, but they are different. They didn't last but 6 years either, 7. Kuntz is doing very well overall. R.H. Johnson was just a bigger, busier project with a tighter timeline. So getting the vendor back to fix the little punch list items has been difficult, just so that I'm honoring our membership use. So otherwise, it's fully fixable. And as far as, I'll even throw this one into the hat. You know, it's discolors. You know, it has an appearance that it gets dirty, no different than any other surface. Our current surfaces over at Palm Ridge are totally unique to the industry. They're totally unique to a vendor that did that for us years and years ago. The vendor is no longer in business. And quite honestly, I don't know of any other solution. So if you or the members have any decking.
I mean, have we visited other communities and other like resorts that have a lot of people? And I mean, I know when I talked to you last year, you said one of the reasons we didn't do cool decking is because you have a traffic pattern. We're always going to have a traffic pattern because we come off of a blacktop parking lot. And that's just how that works, right? And so
The cost difference isn't that much greater for our rubber product than it is for cool decking. We know, based on what the industry and commercial pools are, what they're combating with cool decking. The vendor that has provided this rubber decking in huge formats, I mean, it is all over Las Vegas. It is one of their primary customers. So I think if Vegas is willing to invest in it, you know, that tells you something. Russ and I personally, we went to hotels. We went to Sun City. We observed the install. We observed the time frame that it was down. And Kuntz speaks for itself. It's doing very well. And so I think the best choice for us is to move forward with our choice right now.
Okay, so, and just one more question, I'll leave.
No, one more. And
I'm
then
just
we'll move on.
wondering, you know, we put that down in the dead of summer, right?
Which is their preference.
Oh, it is. Okay,
Yep.
that's the other thing. I just didn't know if
Humid
that was.
conditions help them lay it, slow cure, keep going, instead of showing the hard control joints between it curing fast and then going to the next section,
Okay.
night after night.
Perfect. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the question. I don't see any other, please, go ahead.
You seem like you were asking for helps. You're familiar with presidential pools?
Certainly.
The owner twice removed, very wealthy guy now. It's a personal friend of mine, and if there's anything that you think he's done some of the biggest projects in all of Arizona. If there's anything that could be gained by he or people that he knows in that organization to come out and give us an opinion or something, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to do that. He's a great guy.
I'll ask the same questions that were brought up here today and tell you at the next meeting.
Thank you. Yes, Lynn?
I just had a question for Cliff. Cliff, is anybody looking at equity spending for the clubs? The reason I bring that up is it seems like some clubs get remodel or work done in the club for free. Other clubs have to pay a portion of it. How is that figured out? Who pays what?
I would say, generally speaking, if it's on a repair and replacement program, so for example, Silvercraft, the cabinets and the facilities in there are on our replacement schedule, and generally speaking, it gets taken care of by the association if it's on that schedule. I know there was a shift prior to me coming here, but there used to be a lot of funds that were maybe raised not according to IRS standard, and for good reasons, to try and maybe subsidize some of those things. And we've taken the stance that rather than push that we would schedule things to get done and put them on our repair and replacement schedule and make sure those things got done. So, and then the other calculation that's put in there is want versus need.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for the question. We're at 12 past 11, and whenever you go past that 2-hour window, attention starts to wane. I'm going to have us take a quick 5-minute walk around break, and we will be back therefore at, well, now it's 11:13, so by my clock. So we'll be back in 5 minutes for those of you online and for those of you here, and we'll continue with our next agenda item at that time. Thanks. Everyone, it's 11:20. We're back in session. We thank you very much for those of you who are still with us. Thank you very much. Budget season is always fun. There's a lot of great information and a lot of good discussion that needs to happen. So we're moving on now to agenda item 3.03. Our CFO, Cliff Swan, is going to walk through the updates to our operations budget.
Thank you, Director Novello. Good morning. I think it's still morning to everybody. They put me on the schedule last because they really wanted to make sure we had the diehards left here. So here we are. This was presented obviously at the last Budget and Finance Committee meeting. And I will be presenting it on Friday at the Governing Board workshop in total. Today, however, because we presented this at the last BNF meeting, especially in the spirit of moving things along, I'm going to work through this presentation on any of the changes that were made between the first presentation and today. In the context of the takeaways from the last committee meeting, questions from the not only the committee but from the audience, and then as well as the written questions that were submitted. I got 6 pages of written questions from this committee, and I also want to delve in through this presentation some of the additions and things that are going to address those questions. And then once I do that, I'll let you know, Ms. Novello, and then we can move on from there. Does that sound good? Great. Okay. Okay, so again, looking good, right on budget for this year in terms of how we're going to land this year. Wages, again, significant part of our budget, and we're going to dig into that a little bit. I added some not only slides to talk about our wages and how we're set up and the different types of employees that we have, and also not only divisionally, but within those divisions, the departments, and how we're set up within those departments. There's an attachment on this budget that details each division and then the departments that roll up into each division. And then within those departments, how many employees are salaried employees. And those salaried employees are identified as managers, supervisors, and salaried, okay? And then how many are full-time hourly, part-time hourly, and minimum wage employees. So we just wanted to give some context into how we're set up so that it would also give some context into how we distribute our payroll and distribute our pay increases. We talked a little bit about, excuse me for saying, we talked a little bit about the pay increase and a couple of the changes that are within this is the 955 is still consistent. The 1.1 million is still consistent in terms of the increase year over year. The distribution of that 955, which is the directly related payroll items, the things tied to payroll, so the salaries, taxes, and workers' comp insurance and retirement are all directly impacted by salaries and wages. That increase is 955. The baseline for that increase is our minimum wage increase, and I had miscalculated that in the last presentation. I was thinking in terms of 6 months, but we go year over year through 2 calendar years. So anyway, with the adjustment to that amount that was brought to my attention by one of our committee members and one of the questions that was had, so I went back and went dollar for dollar, position by position, to make sure I had that right in this presentation. So the impact of that is $255,000, okay, of the $955,000. And then workers' comp, I went back, it was actually $80,000. It was an $80,000 increase, and I went on the 35%, but it's really, the increase is on the payroll. So there's a payroll change year over year, so that's also driving up the cost. Ultimately, the increase is 35%, but the payroll has increased, so it's going to go up by more than 35% because the payroll has gone up by more. So, but the 35% increase, 80,000 encompasses the year over year 35% increase, as well as the increase in the premiums we'll have to pay for increased payroll. So that said, those two numbers change. And then I also identified the 38,000, which is the impact to our retirement. So our 401k retirement and retirement plan. 38,000 of the 955,000 is attributable to that. So called that out. So in this budget, we've called out all the items that are affecting the $955,000 increase, which is everything except for the health insurance premiums, which is down at the bottom at $150,000. That didn't change. Some more clarification on the 3%. So when I talk about 3%, I talk about our merit increase. So when we set that percent increase year over year, we use that percent increase to we address our merit raises with that, but we also address any other items within the payroll that we have to address, which could be issues due to compression. So from minimum wage, so we have a minimum wage, for example, went up 7%. Well, if we give a 3% increase to someone who's just outside of minimum wage, and the minimum wage employee goes up 7%, well, we have to raise that person at least to the minimum wage rate. So we have to take care of those issues that are created through compression within our payroll, within our pay structure. So the 3% addresses all of those issues: minimum wage, compression, if we have to reevaluate a position because we have to go to market and that position has changed and we can't get anybody, or if we consolidate positions or change a position, or we have to reevaluate a position, the 3% helps us address all of those issues. So that's what the 3% is for. And then, so the merit raise, we talked about that. I want to be clear on that. The merit raise, we set 8%, which is the top of the merit raise increase that you would get. So we do our evaluations in start in September, and they're for the prior year. Through September 30th. Is it through September 30th? So it's October 1st the prior year through September 30th of the current year. So when we do our evaluations for our employees, they have a grading scale that we evaluate our employees on. There's one for exempt employees and non-exempt employees. When we set that threshold, which in this budget is 3%, there's a grading scale. Based on your grade, you get that percent falls within 1 and 3% increase, okay, based on the grading scale. So that's how we do that. We grade all of our employees. We have our employee evaluations. We sit down with each employee. It's not the only time we sit down with our employees, of course, because we're managing them throughout the year. However, when it comes to the merit raise, that's what we do, and that's how we dole it out. And it goes into effect January 1. Okay, so back to those insights. So I had these in the presentation. You can see I kind of pulled them out because when they're attached as a PDF, but they're actually PowerPoint slides. But this presentation was just getting monstrous, so I decided to leave them out and attach them separately. But you'll see those divisions on each division and the departmental breakdown, and then the employee types of manager, supervisor, salaried, full-time, part-time, and minimum wage within each department within each division. So if you want to see how we're structured and who's working where, please take some time and go through that. It'll give you some insights into how we're set up. A couple of takeaways. We have no minimum wage employees in the general administrative division. They don't exist. We have no minimum wage employees in our golf maintenance division, okay? All of our minimum wage employees are in golf ops, sports pavilion, and in the rec division. Because just something you can glean from looking at that. There's a lot of information in there, but that's one thing you can glean from that. So if you look through that, it gives you some insights into how we're structured. So 70% of the overall increase are going to hourly employees. So when you break down, so that you'll see in this slide, I've put the number of positions for each one. I put the percentage of the total of the positions, and then how much of that increase is attributable to those employee types. Okay, so that's the point of this slide, and I wanted to provide that to the community so they could see that. Okay, so another thing I wanted to provide, we recently got we received our Employers Council 2023 benchmark survey for wages. And, we've done a ton of research and time and work into our employees, from the benefits side and from the pay side. Our biggest asset are our employees, by far. It's not only our biggest expense, but it's the biggest asset we have here. And the time and energy and the cost that we put into each employee, bringing them up to speed on our safety culture, going through their job descriptions, making sure that they're performing, all the things, employee evaluations, all the things that we do, we spend a ton of energy and time into them, and it is our biggest asset. So we're very dialed in on what we pay people and the benefits that we provide, as not only as it relates to the survey, but also as it relates to the market, the immediate market that we exist in. So I wanted to provide some information regarding not only our different cost centers or different cost centers, but also our employee grades and where those kind of lie within the Employers Council average. So Employers Council is something we're part of, and they put together a survey, and in this survey, there's 4 states. You can see up here, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. And within those states, there were over 200 organizations identified in this survey, over almost 85,000 employees. And they took all of that data, condensed it down to a little over 1,000 jobs, okay? So 1,000 positions. And then so we got all that data, and we took our positions and look at the job descriptions of each of the positions and align those with what our positions were, so we could see how we aligned with Employers Council, which is a pretty robust survey with 85,000 employees. So in doing so, we put these charts together to show kind of how we compare to our actual average wages. So all of our positions have a mid, min, and max when it comes to what we pay for each position. We took the average pay, not the mid pay, but the average pay of our employees, which tracks about the mid-range on a whole, okay? And compared that to the average from Employers Council for like positions, okay? And in doing so, we charted this out for each one of our cost centers. So, the building maintenance team, for example, they're at 90% of the average pay according to Employers Council. If you look at rec and bowling, the average pay for like positions in that line of business, we're at 83%. And then if you look all the way over to the right, you can see overall, we're at 83% of the average, or we're 17% below average when comparing our wages in these different areas to Employers Council survey. So within this, I wanted to provide even some more context in terms of, well, how is that distributed? Of course, I have to be careful because there's private information. We have departments of one. I mean, we have job positions of one. Okay, so I can't necessarily go by department because, by position, because it'll really tell you how much people make. However, I was able to distribute this over our job grading scale. So we have a job grading scale, and then these are our job grades. The H on the number identifies that it's an hourly employee, and then it could be full-time or part-time. And then the S on the end of the number says that it's a salaried employee. So when we take a look at all of our job grades, So all 489 positions that are in this budget, all 92 or 3 unique jobs that are identified in this budget fall within this job grade. One caveat, minimum wage. We don't really have a choice on that, so I didn't put it on here because it's mandated. But when we take all of our job grades and compare that to the Employers Council average, again, 17% below average, you can see kind of where the different job grades kind of fall within the average wage for Employers Council. I will say the ones that kind of spike up a little higher are a combination of 2 things. One, it's a very competitive job that we have in that grade, so we have to be very on the market. And 2, it also could be the fact that we have some tenured employee mix there, so there could be very long-term employees there, which are going to be at the higher end of our job scale. But overall, we sit at 83% of the Employers Council job wage overall. And we're good with that number, I will say. I mean, we always try to address issues when they come up, and it's about more than pay. So we also have our benefit structure, which is very, very competitive in the community or in our surrounding job market. Okay, so we have that to help bolster that number, as well as, our culture here. We feel like we've got a great culture. I love working here. It's a wonderful place to work, okay? So, when you look at it, obviously pay is a big part of what people look at, but it's not all about pay, okay? So we understand that, but this is what we like to provide, and I was hoping to give some insights into that for the community. So flipping through here, not that these slides aren't important. Again, I'll be presenting all these again on Friday.
And just to clarify, Cliff, you're doing a summary because you're showing us the changes and responses to some of our questions, correct?
Correct, yes.
Thank
I'll
you.
try and...
No, I appreciate that.
Yes, I'll try to identify or something. I'll try to give some context. But yes, you're right. These were all things through the committee, either through the questions that were submitted, the 6 pages of questions that we received, or feedback from the community at the committee meeting last time. So just one note here. This 805 to 1435, this amounts to a cumulative 58% increase in minimum wage since 2017, since January 1 of 2017. 58% increase cumulative in our minimum wage, which, as you saw from the original slide, is a huge part of our pay structure. Again, 76% of our employees literally are tied directly to it, which means that they're either right at it or it's the beginning of the pay scale of that job grade. So it's a lot of employees. It has a significant impact on our budget when we're mandated on these. Oh, there you go. Okay. All right. This one was very confusing. And again, it was in an attempt to try and give as much information as possible. So I'm going to spend a little time on this slide again. Okay. So 489 employees. Within the current proposed budget, we proposed the increases that total for salaries and taxes and retirement of $955,000 and $150,000 for health insurance, okay? So, but when it comes to pay, we're talking about wages and the impacts of wages, the things that are tied to wages. I put together what would happen if the minimum wage went to $18 an hour, okay? So this is on top of what's currently proposed. So this is already hedged by the increases that are in this budget, all right? So these numbers are on top of that, okay? So when we look at our employee structure, if the minimum wage, we budgeted minimum wage at $15.35, if the minimum wage went to $18 an hour, that would reach very deep into that pay scale that I showed you on that chart, okay? And it would reach 455 of our 489 employees, okay? So for example, every one of our minimum wage employees obviously would be impacted. I would say basically it goes all the way down. We have 41 salaried employees. So if you go back here and you look at that slide, which this clicker is not working very well, so I'm not going to click around too much, but on that scale, on that chart that I showed with the salaried, the manager, supervisor, salaried, those total 41 employees. So basically what I'm saying here is that there's 11 of those 41 salaried employees would actually be impacted by this because there's somebody directly under them that's going up, which is creating a compression problem, which is going to cause them to go up. Okay, so that's why I listed that 11 salaried employees. It's not that we have 11 salaried, it's that there's 41. Even 11 of our 41 salaried employees would be impacted by this $18 an hour. So if it did go to $18 an hour, that would add on top of the proposed budget $825,000, which would be a 6-month impact because it would go into place January 1 of 25. Okay, and then a 1-year impact of double that. Okay, so I just wanted to provide some clarity on that slide. Okay.
There's also in our meeting minutes for our last meeting, committee member Frank Bagnato gave everybody a little piece of information in terms of where some of the drivers for the minimum wage increase could be coming from. So if you'd like to pay attention, if that's of interest to you and you want to get in touch with your legislators here in Arizona, because they're the ones who will make this decision. This is not a governing board decision, nor is it an operations decision. So so it's in our minutes that we just approved for today, for the last meeting. It's in, that we just approved at the start of today's meeting. If you're interested, just take a look at that. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Clip.
Yeah, good point. And just to remind everybody, this is currently an initiative, and it's out for signatures to the community. So the legislators can certainly talk to their constituents to get them to sign or not sign this. But at the end of the day, if the signatures are gotten, it will get on the ballot. And then it's a matter of whether you're for it or not. And if it passes, we'll find out in November in the current year's election. So one of the things that I intentionally didn't put this in the first presentation, okay? And I'm regretting that decision. But we went back to the management team, and we had already started kind of assembling this because I asked them to, but I just didn't put it in the first presentation. But so we put together efficiencies. The key point here, and I'm not going to go through each one, but I encourage you to read it. And I want you to understand that I kind of touched on this last time. We don't sit down to do a budget to determine what we can do to save costs. We do try to save costs, but it's not the, when we sit down to do the budget, if there's something that we can create an efficiency, we do it. But there's things that we do every day throughout the year that create efficiencies, and things that we budget in prior years that create efficiencies. So I wanted to identify what some of those things were. And in here, you'll see things that are impacted this year, which will have a direct impact on next year. You'll see things that we're doing for next year that we're not currently doing this year, or we have the ability to do next year. And then you'll see things that we've been doing for decades that save costs and money. And this goes back to what Kirsten talked about with some of our more seasoned employees. Russ, I think you've been here over 30 years, or roughly 30? 33, okay. I think Todd's got you beat, though. No? Oh, 32.
No, Russ is the record holder.
Oh, man. Okay, so anyway, we have people here that have been doing this a long time, and they've kind of, put some things in place over the years, and some of those are listed here as well. But I just wanted to show, there's 7 slides here that you can, some red meat for you to go down through and just look at it and really kind of whet your appetite on some of the things that we're doing here to save, to create operational efficiencies and save money. So just to recap, So the overall increase to the budget is 1.4 million total. So when you look at the payroll, roughly 1.4 million. When you look at the payroll increase of 1.1, other operating expense increases 350-ish. That's the total increase to the budget. So, I like to say, we put the operating budget together, and when we do that, we determine how much additional funds we'll need. Now, we always get the benefit of having a half a year's dues increase from the prior year comes into the budget for the next year, okay? So you're already looking at a 6-month plus from the prior year dues increase because of the timing of when people's membership dues come up. So that being said, we never get the first year impact, 100% impact of a dues increase, but we do get the prior year, half a year impact. So within these increases, we put the budget together, we present a balanced budget, we determine how much we're going to put in the reserve fund from operations, and then we determine how much additional funds we'll need in our budget to cover the budget and also cover the reserve fund injection. So the budgeted reserve fund injection is 1.1 million. Last year we put in $1.5 million-ish, okay? This year we're on pace to put in a little over $1 million. Okay, so that $1 million is kind of the number we like. That's the number that traditionally we've at least put that in. In fact, if you go back 12 years, it's averaged over roughly $2 million from operations. So we've gone down a little bit. Some of that's just inflation eroding operating income margin. It just flat out is. Fortunately, we have the APF fees, which help us bolster that reserve fund, which have offset some of that the variance coming from operations. So that's kind of the number that we like to identify as going into the reserve fund. And so when we look at that, how do we raise those additional funds and additional revenue? Just going to recap the proposals. So the proposed increase, our dues are currently $540. The proposed increase is to a $30 increase and raise them to $570, okay, as far as membership dues, all right? And then our other lever that we can pull, our other large revenue lever that we pull is golf, okay? So on Friday, we met with the golf working group on golf fees, and it was a good meeting, and came out of that meeting, and there's a couple minor changes within the golf fees, which will be discussed at the committee, but overall, they were very pleased with the presentation of what we're presenting in terms of increases to cover the increased costs. There's roughly $650,000-ish additional costs in golf. So to cover that, we proposed this, and after speaking with them, like I said, a couple minor changes, but overall they're happy with the proposed increase in this budget. And those increases are listed here. Basically $221,000 coming from outside golf, and $439,000 coming from members, and we increased our employee golf rate from $12 to $15, which will generate some coin as well. And then these golf card changes that are outside the golf rate increases, because they don't pay a fee with these two cards. They pay for the card, and that covers the golf round. So we have to increase those at the same time to make sure their rates are also increasing to be fair. So these are the proposed. So encourage you, and I fixed these dates on this report, but next week, Sports Pavilion and Golf will be presenting their divisional budgets. So I encourage you to come to that, and if you want. And then we got the bowling increase. We talked about that. We're going to actually have a breakdown of those tournaments at the committee. But APFs, question on APFs we had. So APFs are tracking about 1130 this year. If you roll out, if you carry the increase, which is about 12% to budget that we are right now, and if you carry that throughout the year, we budgeted 1,014. We'll end up at about 1,130, we think. So 1,100 in this budget. We feel comfortable with that number next year, as far as a budgeted APF, the number of transfers, and then with the $200 increase, that'll generate a total of 5.7 million. So one of the questions I had from the committee as well is, can you give some insights into, call the neighboring communities and see what they did this year? So effective January of this year, Sun City increased to 575. The Grand is at 1861, and Westbrook Village is at 777. So these are per rooftop. So keep that in mind. So our dues are per member. I will say we don't average 2 members per rooftop. We average 1.7 members per rooftop. So if you take our rate of 540 and multiply it times 1.7, or whatever the increase is going to be, 570 times 1.7, that's what our per rooftop rate is. There's that 1.1 million that I talked about right there, coming in from operations. Estimated reserve fund allocation. That traditionally, before we called that out down in the capital section, that just sat as operating cash inflow, but we moved it down to the capital section, present a balanced budget to call that out. Modeling hasn't changed, 45% by fiscal year 28-29. And as well, this hasn't changed, just to, again, call out the fact that a $5 impact in dues will generate an additional 71,000. So if we said, you know what, we're gonna, if $25 gets approved by the governing board, that'll just be 71,000 less in the 1.1 million. So it'll be 1,030,000 roughly going into the reserve fund. But that'll have $143,000 impact every year moving forward. So that's just the impact of foregoing a dues increase, if you want to look at it that way. But that's the impact of the dues. And then again, change some dates here. I highlighted them in green. Just want to be clear about this. Next week, 13th and 14th, we got Sports Pavilion and Golf. And then the 17th this had daytime. It's actually evening on the 17th and daytime on the 18th as far as the community forums go. So just wanted to be clear about that. And yeah, Ms. Novello, that's good. Oh, one other thing. I also attached, we do an expense category roll-up in our financial presentations, our monthly presentations, and our budget presentations. When we present our divisional P&Ls, they're all kind of rolled up when it comes to the operating expenses and the wages and benefits. So I've attached in an attachment to this presentation, we rolled through, Ms. Johnson asked about the employee-related expenses last time. So we haven't done this since I've been here, but I don't have any issues with doing it. So I presented the broke out version of the expense categories. We broke those down to the expense line items for each category. So that's also attached in this presentation. So you can go down and, again, some more red meat for you if you really like digging into budgets and seeing how we're kind of set up. It's a great place to go. So that it'll give a breakdown of each one of these categories in terms of what, the different types of utilities, the different types of repairs and maintenance, things like that within there. So that'll be in there as well. And I guess that's it for my presentation, Director Novello. And I've also, Todd's here as well as an expert to talk about some of our subcontracted services. I know there's some questions about that. So we're here to answer any questions or provide any insights that we can.
So if you can just, while we go through this, I'm sure there are going to be some other questions, but slide, it looks like 48.
Mhm.
It goes through our key dates.
Yes. Okay.
So for the committee and me, March 21st is the presentation of the full plan to the governing board. So we will have one more meeting between now and the 21st as a committee to make sure that we have all our questions answered, and if there's any recommendations and so forth that we pass along through Dick to the governing board, that would be our last time to do that. So at our meeting on the 19th is our last opportunity. But first, just want to make sure, Cliff, and thank you to you and your team for endeavoring to answer the 6 pages of questions from our committee. But I'd like to hear from the members of the committee in terms of at the highest level, are there any big questions that were missing? First, are there any big questions that were missing? Did everybody have the opportunity to get those questions in for consideration and so forth? So any big missing items come to mind? Dwayne, please.
Question about the slide 26. Is that a new slide? This is kind of a leading question for you, Cliff, because it may have been the question I asked you in my list of questions. Slide
Yeah,
26.
Get there.
How should we budget for this?
Yeah, so I figured that would get some discussions today. But yeah, so again, so I talked about it a little bit.
What is it? You talked about.
Sorry. So the impact of $18 an hour. Okay, we talked about it a little bit on this slide. So we hedge that with the current proposal, but if it goes to 18, how do we handle that? Does that just a couple of different routes that come to my head, and just to provide just a couple different. One, do we increase dues and partition those funds out in the event that it happens, and then those funds get used as part of cover operating expenses? 2, do we take the current budget, and if that happens as of January 1, and say that we're on pace for a budget at 1.1 million, and the impact is 800,000, then we only put 300,000 into the reserve fund. That's one approach. So those are kind of 2 approaches that come to mind that we could entertain, and this committee can make a recommendation on, or any other for that matter. Again, there's really 2 proposals out there. There's 2 initiatives out there. One supersedes the other. So to recap those, one is $18 an hour for minimum wage across the board, January 1. That's the first initiative. The second initiative, which supersedes that initiative, so if they both get the signatures, this one will supersede that one. And that one is the regular CPI increase, which is our normal increase that we get every year through minimum wage, which is tied to CPI and inflation, $1 plus that for the next 2 years, which essentially adds $2 to minimum wage over the next 2 years, plus the CPI increase. So I don't have the numbers on that. It won't be more than $8.25.
Well, Cliff, with due respect, this is a repeat of 2 weeks ago, right? This is exactly what you told us in our last presentation. So there's nothing new, and I think the question before you is, what's the risk management approach that you and your team are going to make, and what do we do to support that with a recommendation, if any?
Yeah, I would say the recommendation that we've taken, I've called it out. So Just
Which
like every other.
Is it to reduce the allocation to our fully funded balance? Is that the recommendation? How would we
No, yeah.
fund for this?
Yeah, I guess I'm asking for some direction on as far as what we do. I've identified what the impact would be.
So those are the two options before.
Yeah,
it's,
all
it's
dues
not
are
called out what you'd like, what you're trying to get us to answer for you.
That's right. That's right. So it's called out in terms of what the impact would be. So as far as how we handle it, just like all dues increases, I mean, I can make a recommendation, I guess, but.
So it's either in the two options that you're putting out for us to consider would be a additional increase beyond what's already been proposed, or we would fund for this impact by reducing the investment in our reserve fund.
From operations, correct. We've got to be clear about that because it's not the funds that would be used to cover this are not from the reserve fund. We would decrease what goes into the reserve fund, like you said.
The third option would be a special assessment.
Could be, yes. Again, I'm looking
Dreaded.
for
That would be you're right. That is an option, just like there are lots of. I don't even know if there's ever been a special assessment in our history, right? And we always work very diligently to avoid that, but that would be another option. So.
Well, you'd have to rethink the capital projects as well. And that's not a direct operational thing, but when you talk about the fully funded balance, we can't be spending 10.3 million, 9 million 7, 9 million 7, 5 million, 13 million 8, if that kind of situation exists. So all that would have to come under scrutiny.
Well, keep in mind though that the reserve fund, the items on the reserve, if you forego doing them, you're helping your balance in your bank, but you're not helping your FFB percent because it still stays fully funded or 50% funded or whatever. So the denominator doesn't change. You have the money in the bank, the numerator stays high, but your denominator also stays high.
But you got 4 to 5% to play with.
Correct.
Okay, so we have a question to answer. It's already after 12. I'm going to just make the recommendation. We don't have the time or the consideration to answer that. We didn't realize that was before us today, but it's a great question that needs to be answered. So that would be something we need to take up no later than our next meeting. Agreed, team? That was one big item that I think a couple of us must have had. What else? Are there any other of our questions that we put together and sent in through Dick to the team that are missing, that come to mind?
Is there going to be a written response for all those questions provided back to us that we can just review at some point?
No, there will not be. This is our response today. This is it. So this is the extent of the response we will receive. And if we want more, that's what we need to be considering now. Where are some of the areas that are missing? This was one of the big ones that was missing for me was the risk management around what do we do with our wages. So now we understand the direction that Cliff is asking for from us. There are a few other items just to sort of draw attention that aren't explicitly, well, maybe they are here, Cliff, but there are, you have proposed that we budget for one more, for an additional election next year if one be requested, correct?
Yes, so we kept in our projection, in this year costs, we had the expense of an additional election.
Slide 29, yeah.
Yeah, we had the expense of an additional election, so we're going to keep that in the budget for next year. which is roughly $8,000 to do the advertising and to perform the vote with Vote Now. That's $8,000, and then there's some legal costs and obviously employee-related costs and things like that that are also built into the employee expense and the legal fees.
I know you answered this for me, but I asked, it's come up a number of times, a number of residents have asked as well, what's the total cost of an estimated cost of a recall, inclusive of those items? Best
Well,
estimate.
I mean, legal fees are kind of dependent on various things. So if there's a lot of requests for information, if there's
What's
a
the
lot,
cost of a recall? That's what I'm asking, not the.
if you're asking the cost of the last recall, I can give you that.
Yeah.
Okay. That was $17,491, I believe. Something like that.
Okay, so that's the total, just as a ballpark. Thank you.
Yeah.
A number of folks have asked, and I
Okay.
didn't mean to cut you short, but
Yeah.
that was going to go down a rabbit hole. Okay.
And that included the legal fees.
Correct.
Okay.
There's recalls that have costed less money because of the nature of the recall.
Sure.
In terms of legal fees.
The last one was 17.4.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Your next step or request from us, beyond answering the big question about risk, you need, what else does this committee need to do from your perspective? From an operating budget standpoint, sorry.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, just other than making a recommendation to the governing board, I don't have any other requests.
Okay. I know it would just be my opinion, but I'm going to ask. And before I do ask, Frank, I did not ask. Did you have any questions that you had put forward through Dick that are missing, or do you need more time to go through the details before answering that question?
I do not have any other questions.
Okay. What I'm hoping we can do at a minimum, even though we won't see the written responses, Dwayne, perhaps we can, at least for the committee, would you like to see everybody else's questions sort of, or no need? Okay. Then for the next step, we need to be prepared to make a recommendation at our next Budget and Finance meeting on the 19th regarding this budget. So any additional information that the committee needs before we take that on and prepare for the 19th? No? Would we be prepared to make a recommendation today? Excellent. I assumed as much, but since there were no questions, I wanted to be sure. Are there any questions?
Christine, excuse me, just
Yes.
for the minutes.
Yes,
So the
please.
recommendation at the next meeting will be to approve the budget as presented to the governing board, if or so with changes.
Correct.
Okay.
And if we have any other questions, concerns, that would be the 19th would be the time that we bring it up and settle. Yes, Lynn.
I had one other question for Cliff. You stated the recall last time was $17,491. What was the previous recall cost?
Oh, I didn't dig that up. Sorry. It was at least $8,500
Thank you.
plus legal, whatever that
The
would have been.
the 8,500 is you were just saying it's an ad in the paper and it's the cost of the election.
It's
software.
the advertising and and it's not all encompassing. There's a lot of time and energy spent from the staff. A lot of that you might call sunk costs because we're here, but there's a lot of energy spent.
Sure.
Yeah.
But these are explicit costs that we
Hard
can
costs, yep.
Sure. Understood. Did that answer your question, Lynn?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So we'll make so those are the two big agenda items for the 19th, and we'll go through and review and finalize our recommendations on budget for capital items as well as the operating budget next time. Are there any owner residents in the room that have any questions about the operating budget presentation before I go to online?
There's actually a third. I have three: the capital recommendations, the recommendation for the budget approval of the governing board with whatever questions we might have, and then the minimum wage impacts.
Oh, yeah, thank you for
No, it's okay.
clarifying. In my head, Gary,
that's
that
all
was
right.
included in the operating budget, but you're right. Yes, thank you. You do such a great job at this, we might have you do it. I think I might be up, coming up soon, so I'm all up for that. No, thank you very much for keeping us honest. We have a few folks that are online that are asking questions, so we'll read those through. Bruce Lees, 135422. How can you derive an increase in revenue of $8,000 after renovation when the occupancy rate does not increase? The renovation is to relocate the bar, add components, add furniture. This would appear to be about the capital budget items. So,
I can speak to that.
Mr. Lees, I'm going to invite Carl to come back up to answer that, but we're going to jump to Michelle Brunner. So we did have a question for you, Carl. You can, did you?
I can speak to that.
Okay, so it's capital. No, he answered about payback. So this is the, how did you derive an increase in revenue of $8,000 in that payback?
So
after renovation when the occupancy rate does not increase?
Right. So all the conversations that came up, this of course originated at Sports Pavilion, and in talking with, there was a working group put together on this as well in terms of the design and the needs, and from those conversations, it was determined that, and through the committee, that bowlers aren't really utilizing Lizard Acres because it doesn't suit their needs. And so an increase of 20% on the current occupancy was derived in the ROI calculation, or the incremental revenue increase, due to a remodeled larger bar. I think the current bar that we have is 12 seats maybe, and we're doubling that as far as the bar is concerned. And then the way we're going to situate some affixed high top tables, and then kind of the arrangement is making it more conducive to larger groups that come out of the bowling alley to sit down and enjoy a beverage. That was the determination, or the impact of that remodel in terms of increased revenue. Of course, it's subjective, but we didn't think it was out of the question to have a 20% increase on the sales that are currently in there, and I believe the total sales is roughly 200,000 currently in there.
Okay. Thanks for endeavoring to answer the question. We can go back to we can. For Mr. Lees or anybody else with that question, they can go back and review the properties committee. Yes. Another question came up. Michelle Brenner, 127597. Please explain why you're focused on the retail costs as it relates to the budget. Its history. Please drop it. Of course, not trying to stir up any trouble. It was my question here, so I'm happy to answer. I'm trying to wrap my head around, if we put any kind of a contingency in the budget, what's the right amount? Is it 8? Is it some other number? Or do we just remove it from the budget entirely? I know relatively speaking, it's a small number, but that was the source of my question. So I'm not trying to sort of belabor a dead issue, just really trying to get that figure out in my head, personally speaking. So thank you for that question as well. Were there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you all for attending. It's 12:14. I'm going to call this meeting closed and we will see you all on the 19th. Thank you again.